Hey guys, tonight we are not going to storm a castle or ride with a conquering army. Instead, we're tracing something far more subtle. A golden thread woven through millennia of history. The story of Ethiopia's ancient honey wine, called Tej. Don't get too relaxed. Though, ancient Ethiopia is no walk in the park. You're more likely to get a sunburn or be humbled by a very steep hill than face a sword. But survival is still. Let's call it the fun challenge. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where these stories land. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't what you see, but what you hear. It's a hum, a low, electric thumb that seems to vibrate in the very air you breathe, rising from the valleys and echoing off the craggy peaks that surround you. The air itself is thin and crisp, clean in a way that feels ancient. It smells of dry earth, wild thyme, and something else, something floral and intensely sweet. You're standing on a dusty plateau in the Ethiopian highlands, the roof of Africa. The sky above is a shade of blue so deep and vast it feels less like a ceiling and more like an ocean. In the distance, jagged mountains tear at the horizon. Their slopes a patchwork of greens and dull caress. You look down at yourself. You're wearing a simple, coarse spun cotton tunic, the color of undyed wool. On your feet are rough leather sandals that seem barely adequate for the rocky ground. You feel small here, humbled by the sheer scale of the landscape. This is a land of giants, a place some call the cradle of humanity, where the bones of our earliest ancestors lie sleeping in the Great Rift Valley. Not so far from here, down in one of those deep chasms, you can just make out a serpentine ribbon of water, the lifeblood of this place, the headwaters of the Blue Nile. But your attention keeps returning to that sound, that persistent, hypnotic hum. Your eyes follow the sound, scanning the landscape, until you spot its source. High in the gnarled branches of a towering acacia tree, several strange objects are lodged. They aren't the neat white boxes you might imagine a beekeeper using. These are long, cylindrical tubes, woven from reeds and bound with leather straps, then plastered with a mix of mud and dung to seal them. They look like strange, secret fruit, or perhaps giant, sleeping caterpillars, nestled in the canopy. These are traditional Ethiopian beehives, and they are teeming with life. And here lies one of those quiet little mysteries that historians love to puzzle over. Who was the first person to look at a wild swarm of bees, buzzing furiously in a hollow log, and think not danger, but dinner? Or more accurately, dessert? Academics still debate the precise timeline of when humans in this region transitioned from opportunistic honey hunting, a risky act of theft from wild colonies, to sophisticated beekeeping, or apiculture. It was a monumental leap, a partnership forged between tiny insects and early humans. It meant a reliable source of sweetness in a world that had very few. It was liquid gold. As you watch, a man, his skin the color of rich coffee and his movements slow and deliberate, approaches the base of the acacia. He carries a small clay pot with a smoldering bundle of leaves stuffed inside. He doesn't rush. He seems to be in conversation with the tree, with the air, with the bees themselves. He begins to climb, moving with a fluid grace that speaks of lifelong practice. As he gets closer to the hives, he gently wafts the cool, thick smoke from his pot towards the entrances. This isn't an act of aggression. It's a calming measure, a gentle request for peace. It's a niche bit of knowledge passed down through generations. The smoke masks the bees, alarm pheromones, making them docile and less likely to swarm. He carefully unfastes and nests one of the woven hives and lowers it to the ground. With a wooden tool, he pries open the end cap, and there it is, the source of that sweet smell on the wind. It's a messy, beautiful treasure, golden, viscous honey oozes from the pale wax cells, catching the high minus altitude sunlight The comb is dark, filled not just with honey, but with pollen and flecks of propolis. He carves off a small chunk with his tulund, with a gesture of hospitality that needs no language, offers it to you. You take it. It's warm from the hive, sticky in your fingers. You bring it to your lips and taste it. The flavor is overwhelming, an explosion of wildflowers, of sunshine, of the rich soil, of the very essence of this rugged land. It's unlike any honey you've ever tasted. It's complex, slightly herbal, and profoundly sweet. For now, it's just honey, a simple, profound food. But in this raw, golden liquid, a future is waiting to be uncorked. A future of gatherings, of songs, of kings, of poetry, and of a subtle magic that happens when you just leave it alone with a little water and a lot of patience. The beekeeper gives you a nod, a silent acknowledgement of your shared presence in this timeless place. The humming of the bees softens, a gentle lullaby as the highland air begins to cool. The beekeeper packs up the precious honeycomb into a leather satchel, his movements economical and practiced. He offers you another nod, this one an invitation to follow. You walk with him, leaving the humming acacia tree behind. Your path, leading you down a well-worn trail that snakes along the edge of a steep escarpment. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the vast sky in shades of orange and violet. As you walk, the air grows cooler, and the distant sounds of village life begin to drift up from the valley below, the lowing of cattle, the faint echo of voices. This is all, and where stories are carried on the wind, where history isn't just written in books but is etched into the landscape and whispered in evening gatherings. And the story you're about to step into is one of the biggest of them all. You arrive at a small cluster of round, stone and mud huts with conical thatched roofs, known as Tukuel. A fire pit glows in the center of the settlement, and the smell of roasting grain now mixes with the sweet scent of honey that still clings to your guide. He invites you to sit on a low stool by the fire. An older woman with kind eyes and intricate tattoos on her hands brings you a wooden bowl of warm, savory stew on a piece of flat, spongy bread called injera. As you eat, the village elder begins to speak. His voice is a low, rhythmic murmur, and though you don't understand the words, you understand the cadence of a story being told, a legend passed down through countless nights just like this one. He is telling the story of Magda, the great Queen of Sheba. This is where things get fascinating, and a little fuzzy. You're now, drifting into the realm of the Kebron August Street, or the Glory of Kings, the 14th century epic that forms the bedrock of Ethiopia, a national and religious identity. According to this text, the brilliant and beautiful Queen of Sheba heard tales of the wisdom of King Solomon in Jerusalem and decided to see for herself. She undertook a long, arduous journey, a caravan laden with the finest treasures her kingdom had to offer: spices, gold, precious stones, and here's our golden thread honey. Not just any honey, but the prized, intensely flavorful honey of the Ethiopian highlands, a gift worthy of the wisest king on earth. The elder's story continues, painting a vivid picture of Sheba's court in Jerusalem. He describes her testing Solomon with riddles, their intellectual sparring slowly blossoming into mutual admiration. And of course, the tale culminates in their union and the birth of a son, Menelik, who would return to Ethiopia with the Ark of the Covenant, founding a Solomonic dynasty that would, with a few interruptions, rule for nearly 3,000 years. It's a powerful, foundational myth. But here's a little tidbit that often gets lost in the epic scale of the story: that gift of honey. Why was it so important? In the ancient world, honey wasn't just a sweetener. It was medicine, a preservative, and a symbol of wealth, luxury, and divine favor. For Sheba to bring honey on such a monumental journey suggests its immense value. It wasn't just food, it was diplomacy in a clay jar. It was a statement about the richness of Hurl and a land flowing with milk and honey, to echo a phrase from another famous book. Now, Academics and historians, as they are wont to do, have a field day with this. The historical existence of a single, powerful Queen of Sheba is still a subject of intense debate. Was she one queen, or a composite figure representing a powerful matriarchal society in the land of Saba, which could have been in modern Dynasty Ethiopia or Yemen, or both? The Kebron Olga Street was written many centuries after the events it describes, solidifying a narrative that served a political and religious purpose. But whether the story is literal fact or national epic, it reveals a profound truth. Honey was, and is, central to the Ethiopian sense of identity and prestige. It's a link to a glorious, semi-minus mythical past, a time of legendary kings and queens. As the elder finishes his tale, the fire crackles, sending sparks up into the star-minus, dusted sky. The villagers around the fire are quiet, captivated. The story is as familiar to them as the mountains, yet they listen as if for the first time. The honey you tasted earlier suddenly feels different. It's no longer just a sweet treat from a beehive. It's now imbued with the weight of legend. It's the taste of royal gifts, of epic journeys, of a queen's wisdom and a king's heart. You feel a deep connection to this place, sitting by this fire, sharing this food, and listening to this ancient story. The taste on your tongue is now a taste of Sheba's legacy. It's the flavor of a nation's soul, distilled from wildflowers in sunlight, and steeped in the mists of legend. And the journey of that honey, from a simple gift to a celebrated drink, is only just beginning. The memory of the village fire and the elders' story fades like a dream, and you find yourself moving forward in time. The air feels different, heavier with the energy of commerce and power. You are no longer in a quiet, rural village. You are standing on a paved stone road in the heart of a bustling city. Towering, unmortared stone stelae, like giant stone needles, pierce the sky. These are the famous obelisks of Aksum. Intricately carved palaces and grand villas line the streets, evidence of immense wealth and sophisticated engineering. The sound isn't the gentle hum of bees anymore. It's the cacophony of a thriving metropolis, the clatter of chariot wheels on stone, the babble of merchants haggling in a dozen different languages from Giaz to Greek and Saba, Yan, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Welcome to the capital of the Aksumite Empire, a major player on the world stage, a contemporary and rival to the Roman Empire. You duck into the shade of a grand portico to take it all in. A merchant train of camels, laden with ivory, incense, and rhino horns, lumbers past, heading towards the great port of Adol is on the Red Sea. From there, these goods will sail to India, to Persia, to Rome. Aksum is a hub, a vital link between the Mediterranean world and the exotic markets of the East. Your simple tunic now feels out of place among the finely woven, brightly colored robes of the city dwellers. Power is palpable here. It's in the confident stride of the soldiers, in the sheer scale of the architecture, in the glint of gold jewelry worn by passing nobles. A court official, recognizing you as a foreign visitor, or perhaps just a very confused minus-looking individual, beckons you to follow him. He leads you through a maze of courtyards and into a large, airy hall within what appears to be a royal palace. The room is filled with important minus-looking people, dignitaries, military commanders, wealthy traders, all gathered for a reception. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat and expensive perfumes. Servants move gracefully through the crowd, carrying large clay amphorae and pouring a sparkling, golden liquid into small, handleless ceramic cups. One is offered to you. You take it, and the scent immediately tells you what it is. It's that familiar, sweet smell of honey, but now it's different. It's sharper, with a subtle, intoxicating aroma that hints at fermentation. You take a sip. It's light, sweet but not cloying, with a clean, slightly bubbly finish. This is an early form of Tej, or something very much like it. In this context, it's not just a drink. It's a social lubricant and a true-love statecraft. You watch as a nobleman raises his cup to toast a visiting merchant from Alexandria. A deal is sealed not with a handshake, but with a shared drink of honey wine. A general is praised for a recent victory. His valor celebrated as he drinks from a more ornate cup, a gift from the king himself. Here, sharing this drink is a sign of inclusion, a way to build trust and forge alliances within the empire's elite. Here's a little historical knowledge nugget for you. The Aksumites were master hydrologists. They built sophisticated dams, wells, and cisterns to manage their water resources in the dry highlands. This mastery over water was crucial, not just for agriculture, but also for brewing. A reliable source of clean water meant they could produce honey wine consistently, turning a seasonal gift of nature into a staple of the court. Control the water, and you control the wine. Control the wine, and you have a powerful tool for controlling your court. But as with all things ancient, there's a debate. Historians and archaeologists are still trying to piece together the exact role of fermented drinks in Aksumite society, while inscriptions and archaeological finds, like the remnants of wine amphorae from the Mediterranean, confirm that grape wine was imported and consumed, likely by the highest echelons of society. The local production of honey wine is harder to trace. The evidence is more circumstantial, the confirmed presence of advanced beekeeping, the abundance of honey, and later Ethiopian traditions that point back to this era. Was Tej the drink of the elite, or was it a more common beverage enjoyed by the wider population, while imported grape wine was reserved for the absolute peak of the social pyramid? The exact social stratification of ancient booze is one of those questions that keeps academics writing papers and digging in the dirt. As you stand in the great hall, sipping your honey wine, you notice something interesting. A small group of men are huddled in a corner, drinking from their cups but speaking in hushed, earnest tones. They are discussing a new faith that has been gaining traction throughout the city. A religion from the Roman world centered on a single, all minus powerful good. This is the mid-4th century, and you are witnessing the moment before King Isana makes a monumental decision to convert the entire kingdom to Christianity. This act will forever change the course of Ethiopian history, isolating it from its now Islamic neighbors, but forging a unique and resilient Christian identity. And the Tej in your hand? It will be baptized right along with the kingdom, finding a new place in religious festivals and community gatherings, its golden color perhaps even seen as a symbol of divine light. You take another sip, the sweet wine a silent witness to the dawn of a new era. The empire's toast is not just to wealth and power, but to a future no one in this room can yet fully imagine. The grandeur of the Aksumite court dissolves, and you find yourself in a quieter, more intimate setting. The air is warm and fragrant, and you're no longer surrounded by stone and ceremony, but by earth and leaves. You are standing in a lush, green grove, somewhere in the fertile heartlands of post-Aksumite Ethiopia. Time has moved on. The great stelae of the city doused, and as monuments to a faded glory, and power has become more decentralized, shifting to new centers. But some things, the most essential things, have remained. The hum of the bees is back, a comforting, familiar sound, and you're about to get a formal introduction to the three sacred pillars of the drink that has been warming your journey: the bee, the bark, and the magic of water. First, the honey. A woman, her hands stained with the work of the harvest, gestures for you to come closer. She's standing over a collection of clay pots and woven baskets filled with honeycomb. But it's not all the same. She points to one basket, where the honey is almost white, translucent like spun glass. This, she communicates through gestures, is from the highlands, where bees feast on the delicate blossoms of eucalyptus and acacia. It's light, floral, and highly prized. Then she points to another pot, this one filled with honey the color of dark amber, almost molasses. This comes from the forested lowlands, where bees gather nectar from deep red, trumpet shaped flowers, yielding a honey that is richer, more robust, almost spicy. You begin to understand Tej is not a monolithic entity. Its character, its very soul, is determined by the terroir, a concept usually reserved for grape wine. The taste of the final drink is a map of the landscape, a direct reflection of the specific flowers the bees visited on their daily pilgrimage. Next, the water. This seems simple, but it's not. The woman leads you to a spring that trickles from a rocky outcrop, the water filtering through layers of volcanic rock. It's cool and clear, in a land that can be harsh and dry. A source of clean, pure water is a blessing. It's life itself. The quality of the water is non-negotiable. Murky or stagnant water would spoil the brew, introducing unwanted bacteria and off-flavors. The brewing of Tej is, therefore, tied to these sacred sources of purity. The water is the blank canvas, the silent partner that allows the honey's voice to sing. It's the medium through which the transformation will occur. And now, for the most mysterious member of the Trinity, the woman holds up a bundle of sticks. They look unassuming, like simple twigs or kindling. The bark is a grayish-brown, and when she snaps one in half, it reveals a pale, woody interior. She gestures for you to smell it. It has a curious aroma, earthy and slightly bitter, with a hint of hops. This is Gesho, or Ramen Sprinoides, also known as shiny-leaf buckthorn. This plant is the secret weapon, the X- factor that makes Tej uniquely Tej, and separates it from meads found elsewhere in the world. Here's a fascinating bit of botanical trivia for you. Gesho serves a dual purpose. First, its leaves and stems are a bittering agent. Much like hops in beer, Gesho cuts through the intense sweetness of the honey, providing balance, structure, and a complex, slightly medicinal note to the finished product. Without Gesho, Tej would be cloyingly sweet, a simple honey wine. With it, it becomes a sophisticated, layered beverage. But Gesho's primary role is even more crucial. The woody stems, you see, are covered in naturally occurring yeasts, while the honey itself has some wild yeasts. The Gesho provides a reliable and potent source of the specific microorganisms needed to kickstart and sustain a healthy fermentation. The brewer doesn't need to buy a packet of yeast from a store. She just needs to go forage for the right branches. It's a testament to centuries of observation and folk science. Of course, the exact properties and contributions of Gesho have long been a subject of study, and to some extent, academic debate. For centuries, its function was understood as pure tradition, almost magic. Modern science has allowed us to put it under a microscope, to isolate the specific yeast strains like Saccharomyces cerevisiae that live on its bark and to analyze the chemical compounds that provide the bitterness. Yet, there's still a discussion about the full extent of its impact. How much does the specific soil and climate where the Gesho is grown affect its flavor profile? Are there other, yet unidentified microbial players on those sticks that contribute to the unique fungent character of a truly traditional Tej? The line between science and the brewer's art remains beautifully blurry. The woman takes a large clay fermentation vessel, a pot-bellied jug called an insira. She pours in the pure spring water. She adds the rich, dark honey, stirring it with a long wooden paddle until it dissolves, creating a sweet, cloudy liquid called burrs-e. Then, she adds the Gesho sticks, not the leaves yet, just the yeast-laden stems. She covers the mouth of the pot with a loose cloth, allowing the brew to breathe. And now, all there is to do is wait. You are standing at the very beginning of the process. You've met the three key players. The honey provides the sugar, the soul, the story of the landscape. The water is the pure, life-giving body, and the Gesho is the spark, the catalyst, the keeper of the fermenting magic. The grove is quiet now, the late afternoon sun filtering through the leaves. Stay silent. Slow alchemy is about to begin. You don't have to wait for weeks. Time bends again, and you find yourself huddled in the corner of a simple, Windowless hut. It's dark, but your eyes adjust to the gloom, aided by the low light of a single flickering oil lamp. The air is cool and damp, with a distinct, yeasty smell, like a bakery mixed with a wine cellar. You are surrounded by large clay pots, the very insera you saw being prepared. They sit silently in the darkness, like patient, waiting beings. It has been a few days since the honey, water, and GESAHO sticks were combined. The initial mixture, the sweet bursy, is undergoing a profound transformation. You lean closer to one of the pots. The cloth covering its mouth is gently domed, pushed up from below by an invisible pressure. You can hear a faint, persistent sound, a soft fizz, a gentle pluck minus plop minus plop. It's the sound of life, the sound of fermentation. The wild yeasts, awakened from their slumber on the GESHO bark, are having an absolute feast. They are consuming the simple sugars in the honey and, in their metabolic bliss, are releasing two byproducts, alcohol and carbon dioxide. The gas is what's making the cloth bulge in the liquid fizz. The alcohol, for now, remains a hidden presence, slowly infusing the mixture with its potent magic. This process is where history and science blur into what our ancestors could only have described as a miracle. Imagine you are that first person. Centuries upon centuries ago, you have a pot of sunny water, perhaps left out in a warm place by accident. You'll come back to it a few days later and find it changed. It's bubbling. It smells strange. It's alive in a way it wasn't before. What do? Do you throw it out, fearing it has been possessed by a spirit or has gone bad? Or does curiosity, that most human of traits, get the better of you? You dip a cup into the fizzing liquid and take a tentative sip. The overwhelming sweetness is gone, replaced by something sharp, tangerine, and invigorating. And then, a few minutes later, you feel it, a warmth spreading through your chest, a lightness in your head, a gentle easing of the day's worries. It's not poison, it's a gift. You have just stumbled upon one of humanity's oldest and most delightful discoveries. This first accidental sip is a moment that has been enacted countless times across the globe, with countless ingredients: grapes, grains, apples, rice. Here, in Ethiopia, it was honey. The discovery wasn't an invention, but an observation of a natural process, a partnership with an invisible world of microscopic life. Here's a quirky little detail about this stage of the process. Early brewers had no concept of yeast or microbes. To them, the fermentation was initiated by the GESHO itself, which was seen as having magical properties. Or, in some traditions, the success of the brew was attributed to the blessings of spirits or the favor of God. A brew that failed to ferment, or one that turned sour, wasn't a scientific failure. It was a sign of a spiritual imbalance. The brewer might have been in a bad mood, or a person with an evil eye might have looked at the pot. Rituals, prayers, and even specific songs might be employed to ensure a good fermentation, blending folk science with deep-seated spiritual belief. The exact nature of this discovery moment is, of course, lost to time and is a source of endless fascination for historical food scientists. Did the practice of making honey develop independently in Ethiopia, or was it influenced by drink-making traditions from neighboring cultures, like ancient Egypt or the Arabian Peninsula? Many historians argue for an indigenous origin, pointing to the unique use of GESHO as evidence of a distinct and locally developed tradition. The process is so perfectly adapted to the local ingredients, the specific honeys and the native GESHO plant, that it feels deeply rooted in this specific place, born from the unique ecosystem of the highlands. The debate continues, part of the larger puzzle of how and where humanity first learned to brew. You watch the brewer, the same woman from the grove. As she enters the hut, she moves with a quiet reverence among her bubbling pots. She doesn't use a thermometer or a hydrometer. Her tools are her senses. She dips a finger in, tastes the transforming liquid, noting the decreasing sweetness and the developing complexity. She smells it, checking for any off-minus aromas that might signal a problem. She listens to the gentle song of the CO2 escaping. She is a master of her craft. Her knowledge passed down not in textbooks but through hands minus on experience, from her mother and her mother before her. She gently lifts the cloth from the pot you were observing and adds something new, a bundle of fresh, green Gesho leaves. The woody stems did their job of introducing the yeast. Now, the leaves are added for the second stage of fermentation, to impart the characteristic bitterness and to act as a natural clarifying agent. The brew is still cloudy, still young and aggressive. It is not yet Tej. It is still on its journey. The woman covers the pot again, giving it a gentle, encouraging pat. She leaves the hut, plunging you back into the quiet, fizzing darkness. You are in the womb of creation. Present at the very moment a simple sweet drink begins to grow its potent and joyful soul. The yeasty darkness of the brewing hut gives way to dazzling, high-minus altitude sunlight. You have to squint, your eyes adjusting to a landscape that is both raw and refined. You are standing on a rocky plateau, but the ground beneath your feet has been carved and shaped with breathtaking ambition. Before you is a wonder of the world, a church, monolithic and cruciform, sunk deep into the living rock. It wasn't built up. It was excavated down. You are in Lalibela, the New Jerusalem of the Zagwe dynasty, which rose to power after the decline of Aksum. It is the 12th century, and the connection to the Christian world of the Mediterranean has been strained by the rise of Islam across North Africa. Ethiopia has turned inward, creating a vibrant, isolated Christian kingdom in the heart of the highlands. You walk to the edge of the immense pit, looking down at the roof of the church, which is level with the ground you stand on. A network of trenches and tunnels connects this church to 10 others, all carved from the same single piece of volcanic tuff. Pilgrims, draped in white cotton shawls called shammas, move silently through these subterranean passages, their faces filled with devotion. The air is filled with the sound of chanting, the soft, rhythmic prayers in the ancient Ge'ez language echoing off the stone walls. This is a place of profound spirituality, a testament to a faith so strong it could literally move mountains, or rather, carve them from the inside out. You follow a narrow, winding passage that slopes downward, leading you into the courtyard of one of the churches, Tej Bet, the largest monolithic church in the world. The sheer scale is dizzying. The walls, weathered by centuries of sun and rain, are still decorated with intricate carvings. You feel a sense of deep peace and awe. This is a faith that is lived, breathed, and carved into the very stone of the earth. Later in the day, as the religious ceremonies wind down, the atmosphere shifts. The solemnity gives way to a quiet, communal joy. Families and groups of pilgrims gather in shaded spots, sharing food and drink. And what are they drinking? From goatskin bags and clay jugs, they pour a familiar golden liquid. It's Tej. Here, in this deeply sacred place, honey wine is not seen as a profane indulgence. It's woven into the fabric of social and religious life. You are invited to join a group of priests. Their simple robes a contrast to the grandeur of their surroundings. They are resting after a long day of services. One of them offers you a cup of Tej. It tastes different from the courtly wine of Aksum. It's rougher, cloudier, and more robustly flavored, less filtered and perhaps a bit stronger. It's a drink of the people, not just the kings. They sip it slowly, their conversation a low murmur. They discuss theological matters, the health of their community, the news brought by pilgrims from distant provinces. The Tej facilitates a sense of camaraderie and relaxation after a day of pious duty. This integration of a fermented beverage into religious life is a fascinating aspect of Ethiopian orthodoxy. Unlike some Christian traditions that might view alcohol with suspicion, here it has a place. This is where we can touch on a cool, specific piece of cultural knowledge. The Tej consumed on these occasions, particularly during fasts like Lent, might be prepared slightly differently. The fasting rules of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church are incredibly strict, prohibiting all animal products. So is honey, an animal byproduct, allowed? This is a point of nuanced theological discussion. Generally, honey is considered permissible during many fasts. Unlike meat, dairy, or eggs, the tej drunk during these times is thus a vital source of calories and comfort in a highly restrictive diet. It's a loophole you can drink. Of course, the historical context for this is complex, and, you guessed it, debated by scholars. How did a drink with pre-Christian Taigan roots become so comfortably integrated into one of the world's oldest Christian traditions? Some historians suggest it was a simple matter of pragmatism. Honey was abundant. Grapes were not. Honey wine was what the land provided. Others see a more deliberate process of cultural synthesis, where the new Christian faith absorbed and contextualized existing traditions rather than trying to eradicate them. The golden color of the tej could be imbued with new meaning, symbolizing divinity or heavenly light, and its consumption at feasts and holidays would tie the new religion to existing patterns of communal celebration. It's a classic case of cultural adaptation. As you sit with the priests, the late afternoon sun casts long shadows, making the rock-hewn churches glow a deep, rusty red. The young boy, inaccurately perhaps, begins a game of catch with a ball made of rags. The sound of his laughter echoes in the courtyard, a joyful counterpoint to the quiet conversation of the priests. You realize that in Lalibela, the sacred and the mundane are not separate. They flow into one another, just as the trenches connect the churches. Faith here is not just for Sunday mornings. It's for every day, for work, for rest, for celebration. And tej, this simple, ancient drink, is part of that holistic life. It's the taste of community, a little bit of sweetness and light to be shared after a day spent in the presence of God, in a city carved by angels. Or, so the legends say, you take another sip, the honey wine, tasting of stone and prayer, a humble earthly pleasure in a profoundly holy place. The solemn, sun-baked stone of Lalibela melts away, replaced by the cool, dim interior of a bustling, noisy room. The air is thick with the sweet, fermented scent of honey, the spicy aroma of food, and the unmistakable buzz of human connection. The walls are made of simple wooden plaster, adorned with colorful posters, and maybe a faded photograph of a past emperor. The floor is covered in fresh, fragrant grasses, a traditional touch that both perfumes the air and makes you feel like you're having a picnic indoors. Low wooden stools and tables are scattered around the room, every single one of them occupied. You have just pushed open the creaking door to a Tej Bet, a traditional Ethiopian honey wine house. This isn't a palace, and it isn't a church. This is the third space, the social heart of the community. It's the Ethiopian equivalent of a British pub, an American diner, or a French cafe. But it has a vibe all its own. The sound is a happy chaos. There's no blaring sound system, just the loud, overlapping chatter of dozens of conversations, punctuated by bursts of laughter. Men and women, young and old, are gathered here. They lean in close, sharing gossip, debating politics, telling stories, arranging business deals, or perhaps even kindling a romance. A woman with a warm, welcoming smile. The proprietor sees you standing awkwardly by the door. She gestures you toward a small, empty stool in a shared crowded corner. You squeeze in, and a moment later she places a strange, flask-like glass vessel in front of you. It has a round bottom and a long, narrow neck, like something out of a chemistry lab. This is a be real, the traditional glassware for drinking tej. She fills it to the brim with a cloudy, golden liquid from a large plastic kettle. You take your first sip in this new environment. It's vibrant and alive, humming with the same energy as the room. The taste is a perfect balance of sweet and sour, with that characteristic bitter undertone from the Gesho. Drinking it here, surrounded by the lively community. It tastes different yet again. It tastes of fellowship. You watch the table next to you, where a group of men are in a heated but good-natured argument, gesticulating wildly. They make their points, then pause to take a long drink from their birales, the tej seeming to fuel their friendly fire. Across the room, two young women are giggling, sharing a secret as they sip their own drinks. This is the quintessential Tej Bet experience, a cornerstone of Ethiopian social life for centuries, and it reveals a wonderful, slightly counterintuitive piece of cultural information. In many Western cultures, establishments dedicated purely to drinking can sometimes have a slightly seedy or masculine-coded reputation. But the Tej Bet is traditionally a very inclusive space. It's often owned and operated by women, providing them with a respectable and independent source of income. And it has long been a place where both men and women can socialize together comfortably, which wasn't always the case in other public venues. It's a place for the whole community. The proprietor comes by again, this time with a small plate of roasted barley and chickpeas, called kulo. It's a simple, salty snack, the perfect accompaniment to the sweet wine. This is another key aspect of the Tej Bet. It's not just about the drink, it's about the hospitality, the sense of being cared for. You feel less like a customer and more like a guest in someone's home. Of course, the exact origins of the Tej Bet as a formal institution are, like many things on our journey, a little hazy and open to academic interpretation. When did these establishments transition from being informal extensions of a brewer's home to dedicated, commercial public houses? Some historians trace their rise to the growth of urban centers like Gondar and later Addis Ababa, where there was a concentrated population with a need for social spaces outside the home or workplace. Others argue the tradition is much older, simply evolving with the times. They were the nodes of the community's social network, the places where information was exchanged, news was spread, and a collective identity was reinforced, one be real at a time. As you sit there, soaking in the atmosphere, you notice the rhythm of the place. People come and go. A farmer might stop in for a quick drink after selling his goods at the market. A group of office workers might gather after their day is done. A couple might be on a date. The Tej Bet is a microcosm of society. The cloudy, unfiltered Tej you're drinking is the standard fare, affordable and delicious. But you see the proprietor occasionally bring out a different bottle for a special guest, pouring a liquid that is much clearer, a pale, brilliant gold. This is the filtered, or refined Tej, a sign of status and a taste of luxury. A hint that even in this most democratic of spaces, subtle social hierarchies still exist. The noise, the laughter, the fragrant grass underfoot, the sweet-minus or taste of the honey wine, it all combines into a powerful, comforting sensory experience. You're no longer just an observer of history. You're a participant in a living tradition. You are part of the buzz. You raise your be real in a silent toast to the woman who runs this place, a link in a long chain of female entrepreneurs who have created these vital, joyful spaces. The Tej Bet is not just a house of honey wine. It's a house of community. The lively buzz of the Tej Bet fades, but you remain in the presence of its creator. You find yourself not in the public-facing front room, but in the heart of the operation, the back room, the private kitchen of the brewer herself. The space is simple, rustic, and meticulously organized. It's warm from a cooking fire, and the air is layered with the scents of honey, yeast, spices, and the ubiquitous Gesho. This is the domain of the Tej Bet, the brewer, and for centuries, this role has been overwhelmingly filled by women. You are in the presence of a guardian of tradition, a chemist, a businesswoman, and an artist. The woman use, or owning the Tej Bet is here, but she's not serving customers now. She's at work. Her movements are confident and efficient, born of countless repetitions. She's checking on a new batch of Tej, which is fermenting in a series of large, stoppered clay jars in a cool, dark corner of the room. This isn't just a recipe for her, it's an inheritance. The knowledge she holds was passed down to her from her mother, who learned it from her mother. A chain of matriarchal knowledge stretching back through time. She gestures for you to watch as she begins to prepare a new batch. She doesn't use measuring cups or scales. Her measurements are in handfuls, in the feel of the ingredients, in the muscle memory of her arms as she stirs the heavy mixture. This is one of the most vital mainstream knowledge points about Tej production. It is a domestic art form, perfected by women within the household. While men might have been the beekeepers or the public face of the monarchy, women were the masters of fermentation, turning the raw honey into a valuable, celebrated product. They were the alchemists in the kitchen. She lets you in on a secret. She points to a small, tightly minus-lidded clay pot tucked away on a high shelf. She opens it, and a pungent, complex aroma wafts out. Inside is a thick, bubbling, sort of minus-like starter culture, a living slurry of yeast and bacteria from a previous successful batch of Tej. This is her secret ingredient. While many brewers rely solely on the wild yeasts from the Gesho, she maintains the starter, her own personal house culture. This provides a faster, more reliable fermentation and imparts a unique flavor profile to her Tej that no one else can replicate. It's her microbial fingerprint, a living legacy that gives her product a competitive edge. This is a fantastic little tidbit. The use of a private starter culture, much like a prized sourdough starter in baking, is a sign of a truly expert brewer. It's a blend of science and tradition that elevates the craft. This brewer's knowledge is holistic. She knows which local farmers produce the best honey for her style of Tej. She can tell by the smell of the Gesho leaves if they were harvested at the right time. She understands the subtle shifts in temperature throughout the year and how they will affect the speed of fermentation. This knowledge is her power. It's her intellectual property, guarded as fiercely as any state secret. She would never write down her full recipe. To do so would be to give away her family as livelihood. It's taught through observation, through participation, from one generation of women to the next. This is where a fascinating historical and anthropological debate comes into play. How did this gendered division of labor, men often in the fields, women in charge of processing and fermentation, come to be so entrenched in Ethiopian culture and many others around the world? Some scholars argue it's rooted in the practicalities of domestic life, where the constant attention required for fermentation fits more easily into the daily rhythms of household management. Others propose more complex social theories, suggesting that the transformation of raw ingredients into cultured products like bread, cheese, and alcoholic beverages was seen as an extension of women's life-giving, transformative biological roles. It's a compelling idea, though impossible to prove definitively. It frames these brewers not just as cooks, but as central figures in the process of creating culture itself. The woman begins to hum a low, melodic tune as she works, a traditional song that her mother sang while brewing. The rhythm of the song matches the rhythm of her stirring. It's a work song, but it's also a kind of prayer, a way to imbue the brew with good intentions and positive energy. You realize you are witnessing a sacred act, a ritual that is both deeply scientific and profoundly spiritual. She finishes her work, covering the new pot and moving it to its place alongside the others. She wipes her hands on her apron and gives you a small, proud smile. She has ensured the continuity of her craft, her family, and her community's joy for another cycle. In this humble back room, far from the eyes of kings and priests, lies the true, beating heart of the story of Tej. It's a story of quiet expertise, of guarded secrets, and of the enduring power of women as the keepers of a nation's favorite drink. You feel privileged to have been allowed a glimpse behind the curtain, into the brewer's sacred, fragrant sanctuary. The intimate, fragrant kitchen of the brewer dissolves, and you are suddenly thrust into a scene of opulent, boisterous splendor. The scale of everything has been magnified. You are in a vast castle hall, its stone walls draped with rich, colorful tapestries and its high, timbered ceilings echoing with the sounds of music and feasting. The light from dozens of tall candelabras glints off gold plates and jewel-encrusted goblets. You are in Gondar, the new capital of Ethiopia, founded in the 17th century. This is the era of the Ides dynasty, a time of renewed stability and cultural flourishing, often called the Gondar period, or even the Camelot of Africa. You are a guest at an imperial banquet in the Tej Bet, the royal enclosure, a fortress-city of stunning castles and palaces that still stand today. The emperor himself, perhaps the great Ides or one of his successors, is seated on a raised throne at the head of the hall. He is surrounded by his royal family, high priests, military commanders, and visiting dignitaries. The air is heavy with the smell of doro wat, a rich and spicy chicken stew. Then piles of injera are being carried out on massive platters. The sheer abundance of food is a theatrical display of the empire's wealth and the emperor's generosity. And to drink? Tej, of course, but this is not the cloudy, humble Tej of the Tej Bet or the robust brew of the Lalibela priests. This is Tej in its most exalted form. Servants in fine livery move through the hall, pouring a crystal-clear, shimmering, pale-gold liquid from ornate silver pitchers. This is Derek, or tea, des Tej, a beverage that has undergone a long, patient process of filtering and clarification. Sometimes for months, it has aged, smooth, and potent. Its high quality is a direct reflection of the emperor's status. To serve anything less would be an insult to his guests and a stain on his honor. You are handed not a simple cup or a glass be real, but a heavy, beautifully crafted drinking horn, perhaps made from the horn of a bull and decorated with bands of silver. This is where we hit upon a great historical point in the Gondar court. Tej was more than a beverage. It was an integral part of the political theater. The flow of Tej was centrally controlled. The emperor had his own royal brewers, who produced this high-quality, filtered version exclusively for the court. The quantity and quality of Tej offered to a guest was a precise calibration of their social standing and their favor with the emperor. A powerful general might receive the finest aged Tej in a golden goblet, while a minor provincial official might receive a younger, less filtered version in a simpler vessel. It was a liquid language of power. As you sip from your horn, the Tej is dangerously smooth, its high alcohol content masked by a delicate, floral sweetness. The music swells. A group of musicians, playing the mazanquo, a single stringed fiddle, and the kra, or a 6 stringed lyre, accompany a singer whose voice soars through the hall, telling tales of heroic battles and legendary kings. The feast is a multi-sensory spectacle designed to impress and overwhelm, to solidify the emperor's power, not through force alone, but through magnificent displays of culture and hospitality. Here's a fantastic, slightly quirky detail about these imperial feasts. The sheer volume of food and Tej consumed was staggering. Chronicles from the period describe banquets that would go on for days, with hundreds of cattle slaughtered and thousands of gallons of Tej brewed in preparation. One account, possibly exaggerated but telling nonetheless, claims that a particular emperor's court consumed over 1,000 pitchers of Tej in a single day. This wasn't just gluttony, it was a political strategy. A well-fed and well-lubricated nobility was a happy and less rebellious nobility. The emperor's ability to provide such lavish hospitality was a constant, public reinforcement of his legitimacy and his control over the land's resources. Naturally, the precise nature of courtly life in Gondar is a subject of ongoing historical research, while the castles themselves provide hard architectural evidence. The day-to-day happenings within them are pieced together from royal chronicles, religious texts, and the accounts of the few European travelers, like the Scottish explorer James Bruce, who visited the city Historians debate the degree to which these accounts are reliable. Were the feasts always so grand? Or were the chroniclers embellishing to glorify their patrons? How much of the court ceremony was ancient tradition, and how much was newly invented by the Gondar and emperors to bolster their image? The Camelot of African narrative is a powerful one, but scholars are always working to separate the romantic myth from the political reality. The feast continues late into the night. The stories get louder, the laughter more frequent. Alliances are being forged and reinforced in this hall. Fueled by the shared experience of this magnificent feast and the endless flow of imperial honey wine, you look at the emperor on his throne, observing his court. He is the center of this universe, and the golden Tej flowing from his stores is like the gravity that holds it all together. It is a symbol of the land's bounty, refined and perfected into a drink worthy of a king, a liquid testament to the glory of Gondar. You take another sip from your horn, tasting the sweet flavor of power, prestige, and imperial splendor. The grand, echoing hall of the Gondar and castle fades, but a single object from the feast remains, floating into focus. The sounds of the imperial court are replaced by a quiet, contemplative stillness. You are holding it in your hands, feeling its strange and specific shape. It's the Be Real, the flask-like glass vessel you first encountered in the Tej Bet. Here, away from the hustle and bustle, you can finally appreciate its unique and brilliant design. It feels delicate yet sturdy, with its round, bulbous base that fits snugly in your palm and its long, slender neck that rises like the stem of a flower. The Be Real is not just a cup. It's a piece of purpose-built technology, a tool perfectly engineered for the consumption of Tej. Let's break down its form and function, which is a core piece of knowledge for any Tej aficionado. First, the round bottom. This isn't just for aesthetics. It allows the vessel to be cradled in the hand, gently warming the Tej if it's served cool, while maintaining its temperature if served at room temperature. The shape also makes it surprisingly stable when placed on a flat surface, despite its lack of a flat base. Then, the most distinctive feature, the long, narrow neck. This serves several purposes. Primarily, it minimizes the surface area of the liquid that is exposed to the air. This is crucial because it traps the delicate, volatile aromas of the honey wine inside the flask. When you raise the Be Real to your lips, these concentrated aromas, the floral notes from the honey, the earthy spice from the Gesho, funneled directly to your nose just before you sip, dramatically enhancing the tasting experience. It turns a simple drink into an aromatic event. It also, quite practically, helps to keep out flies or dust, an important feature in any open air or bustling environment. And here's a wonderfully weird and specific piece of social etiquette tied to the Be Real. The narrow neck dictates that you must tip your head back quite far to get the last drops of Tej out of the bulbous bottom. In a social setting, this act of tilting your head back, exposing your neck, was traditionally seen as a sign of trust and relaxation among your companions. You are comfortable, off your guard, and enjoying yourself. Conversely, if you are drinking with people you don't fully trust, you might only sip cautiously, without tilting your head back so dramatically. The bottle's very design encourages a certain body language, a physical expression of the social atmosphere. Now, where did this strange and wonderful object come from? The history of the Be Real is a fascinating little side street in our journey. Unlike many things, it is a topic of some discussion among historians and glassware experts. The word itself is thought by some linguists to be derived from the Italian word barrel, meaning barrel, suggesting a possible influence from Italian raiders or visitors centuries ago. Others argue for a more indigenous origin, pointing to similar long-necked gourd or clay vessels that predate significant European contact. The most likely story is one of synthesis. The basic shape may have existed in other materials, but the arrival of glass making knowledge, possibly via trade routes connected to Egypt or the Mediterranean. allowed for the creation of this refined, transparent version. It's often said that the Be Real looks like a piece of laboratory equipment, and that's not just a coincidence. Its shape is strikingly similar to a Florence flask, used in chemistry labs for boiling liquids evenly. While there's no direct evidence that the Be Real was repurposed from a scientific setting, it's a compelling thought. Did an early Ethiopian intellectual or a visiting missionary with a chemistry set in spiral Hochul glassblower? Or is it a case of convergent design, where two different cultures independently arrived at the same optimal shape for a similar purpose in one case, controlling chemical reactions, and in the other, controlling the sensory experience of drinking? It's a fun riddle with no clear answer. You hold the empty Be Real up to the light. The glass is not perfect. It might have small bubbles or slight imperfections, signs that it was hand-blown by a local artisan, not mass-produced in a factory. Each one is unique. You trace the line of its neck with your finger, marveling at how such a simple object can be so perfectly suited to its purpose. It's a testament to the ingenuity of Ethiopian culture, an elegant solution to the question of how to best enjoy their national drink. The Be Real is more than just a container. It's an integral part of the ritual of drinking Tej. It slows you down. You can't gulp from a Be Real. You have to sip. It forces you to be patient, to savor the aroma, to appreciate the color and clarity of the liquid. It elevates the act of drinking from simple consumption to a mindful, sensory experience. It is the silent, graceful partner to the honey wine it holds, a beautiful piece of function, a art that has shaped the very way a nation enjoys its favorite drink for centuries. The quiet contemplation of the Be Real gives way to a joyous, vibrant cacophony. You are standing in the courtyard of a family home, surrounded by a kaleidoscope of color and sound. A large tent has been erected, decorated with bright fabrics and flowers. The air is electric with excitement and filled with the aromas of a massive feast being prepared. Spicy stews, roasting meat, and fresh bread. Music is playing, a lively, upbeat rhythm that makes you want to dance. You are a guest at an Ethiopian wedding, a celebration that is not a quiet, one-day affair, but a multi-day marathon of feasting, dancing, and community bonding. And at the heart of it all, fueling the joy and sealing the vows, is Tej. In the center of the courtyard, under the shade of the tent, sit the bride and groom. She is radiant in an embroidered white gown, her hair intricately braided. He is handsome and proud in a matching embroidered suit. They look a little overwhelmed, but blissfully happy. Family, friends, and neighbors from all walks of life swirl around them, offering congratulations, blessings, and gifts. This is a public, communal affirmation of their union. A procession of women emerges from the house, carrying trays laden with food and large, celebratory jugs of Tej. This isn't just any Tej. This is a special wedding brew, likely made by the bride's mother or another close female relative, started weeks or even months in advance. It's made from the best honey, carefully fermented, and often represents the pride and honor of the bride's family. To serve a fine, potent Tej is to show respect for the groom's family and all the assembled guests. It's a liquid symbol of the family's good standing and their generosity. You are handed a Be Real of the celebratory wine. It's delicious, probably a medium- sweet version designed to be enjoyed by a wide range of palates over a long period. As you sip, you witness one of the core rituals of the celebration. The fathers of the bride and groom, representing the joining of the two families, stand and raise their own glasses of Tej. They make long, eloquent speeches, full of proverbs, blessings, and advice for the new couple. They toast to the health of the bride and groom, to the future of their families, and to the hope of many children. The entire assembly then drinks together. This is the moment the bond is socially sealed. The shared drink of Tej acts as a liquid contract, a witness to the vows exchanged. It transforms the couple's personal commitment into a public, community-wide reality. This use of a shared beverage to formalize agreements is a classic historical practice seen in cultures worldwide. And here, Tej is the chosen medium. Here's a little cultural detail for you that highlights the sheer scale of these events. A traditional Ethiopian wedding celebration can last for 3 days, or even up to a week. The hospitality is continuous. Guests come and go, and there is always food and, crucially, a seemingly endless supply of Tej. This requires an enormous amount of planning and resources. Families might save for years to host a proper wedding. The brewing of the Tej alone is a monumental task. We're talking about preparing dozens, if not hundreds, of gallons. It's a testament to the importance of community and celebration in the culture. The expense and effort are not seen as a burden, but as a joyful obligation. The academic world, particularly anthropologists and sociologists, finds these rituals fascinating. They often debate the underlying functions of such extravagant, lengthy celebrations. Are they purely about celebrating the couple's love, or do they serve other, more pragmatic purposes? Many scholars argue that these weddings are a vital mechanism for reinforcing social networks. By inviting hundreds of people, a family isn't just throwing a party. They are reaffirming their connections, creating underpaying social debts, and demonstrating their status within the community. The lavishness of the feast and the quality of the Tej are direct investments in the family's social capital. It's a complex interplay of love, duty, and social strategy. As the afternoon wears on, the formal speeches give way to dancing. The groom leads his bride onto the dance floor, and soon the entire courtyard is a swirling mass of white-robed guests, their shoulders shimming to the infectious rhythm of the music. The Tej has done its work, loosening limbs and lifting spirits. The atmosphere is one of pure, unadulterated joy. You see the bride's mother, the brewer of this magnificent Tej, watching from the doorway of her home. She has a look of immense pride and satisfaction on her face. Her creation is fueling the happiness of her daughter's most important day. You stand at the edge of the celebration, sipping your honey wine. The drink in your hand feels charged with the emotion of the day. It's the taste of new beginnings, of family pride, of community support, and of boundless, effervescent joy. It's more than just a wedding beverage. It's the golden thread that ties everyone together, a sweetened, potent symbol of a bond that is hoped to last a lifetime. The joyous, communal music of the wedding fades into the background, and you find yourself back in the familiar, cozy confines of a Tej Bet. But tonight, the usual cacophony of chatter is subdued. The crowd is gathered in a circle, their attention focused on one man. He sits on a low stool, holding a strange and beautiful instrument. It's a mazenkuo, a diamond-sheep, single-stringed fiddle with a long neck, played with a horsehair bow. The man's eyes are closed, his head cocked as if listening to a voice only he can hear. He is an Azimari, a traditional Ethiopian minstrel, a poet, a social commentator, and a living repository of oral history. Beside his stool, with an easy reach, is a well-used be-real of Tej. He takes a slow, deliberate sip, holds the liquid for a moment as if gathering his thoughts, and then he begins to play. The sound of the mazenkuo is haunting, almost like a human voice. It can weep, it can laugh, it can soar. Then he starts to sing. His voice is raw and powerful, and the words flow in an endless, improvised stream. He sings about the news of the day, about a recent political event, about the high price of grain in the market. He pokes gentle fun at a wealthy merchant sitting in the corner, who takes the ribbing with a good-natured smile. He praises the beauty of the woman who runs the Tej Bet. The crowd hangs on his every word, laughing, nodding in agreement, and sometimes shouting out encouragements or suggestions for his next verse. This is the art of the Azimari, a central and beloved tradition in Ethiopian culture. They are more than just musicians. They are a unique combination of bard, journalist, and stand-up comedian. Their skill lies in their ability to improvise witty, poetic, and often satirical lyrics on the spot, set to the melody of their mizenkyō. And for many, the key to unlocking this flow of creativity, this liquid courage to speak truth to power, or at least to the patrons of the bar, is Tej. The connection between Tej and the Mari is a well-established cultural touchstone. The honey wine is seen as a muse, a catalyst that loosens the tongue and sharpens the wit. The Mari sips his Tej not to get drunk, but to enter a specific creative state, a flow where the rhymes come easily and the observations are keen. He is a professional, and the Tej is a tool of his trade. He nurses his be real throughout his performance, using it to pace his set, taking a sip during an instrumental break while he formulates his next lyrical jab or poetic flourish. Here's a cool, niche detail about the Mri's performance. Their lyrics often employ a sophisticated form of Amharic wordplay called -n-a-vrq, which means wax and gold. The wax is the obvious, surface meaning of the lyrics, while the gold is the hidden, deeper meaning, which is often unpolitical, satirical, or risque. For example, a song might seem to be about a farmer's love for his stubborn donkey, but the gold might be a subtle critique of a local politician. This allows the Mari to comment on sensitive subjects without being overtly confrontational. It's a high-wire act of poetic diplomacy, and the ability to craft these double meanings in real time is the mark of a true master. The Tej, it is said, helps to melt the wax and reveal the gold. Of course, the role of the Mri and their relationship with alcohol is a topic that fascinates cultural historians. Is the Tej a genuine creative stimulant, or is it more of a placebo, a part of the ritual and persona of being an Mri? Scholars might argue that the connection is more about the social context. The Tej Bet is the Mri stage, and drinking Tej is part of the performance, a way to connect with the audience who are also drinking. It creates a shared experience and reinforces the Mri's identity as a man of the people, a witty observer participating in the same communal pleasure as his listeners. The historical debate lies in whether we view the Mri as a lone, inspired artist fueled by a magical elixir, or as a savvy social actor performing a well-understood cultural role in a specific social setting. The Mri's song shifts. He now sings a heartbreaking ballad of unrequited love, and the millennia cries along with his voice. The mood in the Tej Bet becomes somber. The patrons are silent, lost in the story. Then, with a sudden change of tempo, he launches into a heroic tale of a past warrior, and the energy lifts once more. He is a master of emotion, conducting the mood of the room with his single string and his honey-fueled words. His performance lasts for hours, a testament to his stamina and his deep well of stories and melodies. As he finally plays his last note, the room erupts in applause. Patrons press forward to give him tips, and the proprietor refills his be real for free, a sign of respect for his artistry. You realize you have just witnessed something incredibly special. You've seen how Tej is not just a social lubricant for the audience, but a creative partner for the artist. It's the liquid courage that allows the truth to be told, the stories to be sung, and the community to see itself reflected in the witty, poignant, and beautiful wax and gold of the minstrel song. The haunting voice of the Mri and the confines of the Tej Bet dissolve, and you find yourself once again in the quiet, sun-dappled workspace of a brewer. But this time, you are not just an observer. You are being invited to participate, to get your hands sticky, to understand the slow, patient art of brewing not as a concept, but as a physical process. The brewer, a woman with kind eyes and hands that show a lifetime of work, gestures for you to join her. Today, you will feel the rhythm and patience required to create Tej. The journey begins with the honey. She hands you a heavy clay pot filled with dark, viscous honeycomb, fresh from the beekeeper. Your first task is to separate the honey from the wax. There are no fancy centrifuges or filters here. The method is ancient and defective. Warm water is poured over the comb. You plunge your hands into the mixture. The water is pleasantly warm, and the wax is soft and pliable. You squeeze the comb, a process called draining, breaking up the cells and encouraging the honey to dissolve into the water. The scent is intoxicating, a rich perfume of wild flowers and earth. This is a slow, messy, tactile process. It's not about speed. It's about ensuring every last drop of sweetness is captured. After a while, the wax is gathered up and set aside. It won't be wasted. It will be used to make candles or to seal other pots. Nothing is discarded. Once the honey is fully dissolved, you have a cloudy, sweet liquid, the burzi. Now comes the first critical judgment. The brewer dips a finger in and tastes it. She offers you a taste as well. Is it sweet enough? Too sweet? This is a crucial decision point that will determine the final character and alcohol content of the tej. A sweeter burzi will result in a stronger, more alcoholic tej, as the yeast will have more sugar to convert. A less sweet mixture will produce a lighter, drier drink. The brewer makes her decision based on experience and the type of tej she intends to create. Today, she decides it's perfect. Next, you move to the fermentation vessel, the large, pot-bellied insira. The burzi is carefully poured in, strained through a loose weave cloth to catch the larger pieces of wax and debris. Now it is time to introduce the catalyst. The brewer hands you a bundle of Gesho stems. Your job is to bruise them slightly, to crack the bark by rolling them between your palms or against a stone. This, she explains through gesture, helps to expose the yeast living on the bark and allows it to mingle more effectively with the sweet liquid. You drop the bruised stems into the insira. The brewer then covers the top with a clean cloth, tied loosely with a leather cord. The job is set. The microscopic magic is ready to begin. This first stage of fermentation is anaerobic and can take anywhere from a few days to over a week, depending on the ambient temperature. This hands-on experience gives you a profound appreciation for a key element of traditional brewing patience. In a modern world accustomed to instant gratification, the multi-week process of making tej feels like a radical act of slowness. The brewer cannot rush the yeast. She must work in harmony with its natural life cycle. She is a collaborator with nature, not its commander. This is a great place to bring in a specific, nerdy brewing detail. During fermentation, a thick layer of brownish foam, called a cross-en, will form on top of the liquid. A novice brewer might be alarmed by this, thinking it's a sign of spoilage. But the experienced brewer knows this is a sign of a healthy, vigorous fermentation. She knows to watch the cross-en rise and then fall. When it falls, it signals that the primary, most active stage of fermentation is complete, and it is time for the next step. This knowledge is folk science at its finest, a system of observation and interpretation developed over centuries. The historical debate around this process often centers on consistency. Without modern tools for sterilization and temperature control, how did ancient brewers ensure a consistent, safe product? How did they avoid their brew turning to vinegar or being contaminated by harmful bacteria? The answer, scholars argue, lies in a combination of factors. The high sugar content of the honey and the eventual production of alcohol both inhibit the growth of many spoilage microbes. Furthermore, the Gesho plant itself contains natural antibacterial compounds. But the most important factor was likely the brewer's own carefully guarded starter culture and her meticulous, albeit non-scientific, attention to cleanliness and process. For every successful batch, there were likely many failures, especially for inexperienced brewers. The art was in minimizing that risk through hard -1 wisdom. After about a week, the brewer decides the time is right. The violent bubbling has subsided into a gentle fizz. She removes the cloth and gestures for you to help her fish out the spent Gesho stems. Their job is done. Now, she adds a large bundle of fresh, green Gesho leaves. These are for the second fermentation, which will add the characteristic bitterness and help to clarify the brew. The pot is sealed again, this time for a longer, slower secondary fermentation, which could last several more weeks. You wipe your sticky hands. You haven't created a finished product, but you have participated in the crucial first steps. You have felt the weight of the honey, smelled the fresh Gesho, and set in motion a slow, quiet transformation. You have a newfound respect for the physical labor, the sensory wisdom, and above all, the profound patience that is brewed into every single drop of Tej. The hands minus on work of the brewery fades, and you find yourself once again in a social setting, a bustling marketplace or perhaps a large family gathering. The air is filled with the murmur of conversation, and all around you, people are enjoying Tej. But as you look closer, you begin to notice the subtle differences. The liquid in one person's be real is cloudy and opaque, the color of honeycomb. In another's, it's much clearer, a translucent amber. And in the cup of a particularly wealthy minus-looking merchant, it is brilliantly clear, a pale, shimmering gold, almost like a white wine. You are witnessing the social stratification of Tej, a visual guide to the class structure of Ethiopian society, all told through the clarity of a drink. The brewer who was your guide appears at your side, acting as a kind of docent for this social scene. She points to the cloudy, unfiltered Tej being enjoyed by a group of farmers. This, she communicates, is Burzi that has been only lightly fermented, or a very young, unfiltered Tej. It's often still slightly sweetened lower in alcohol. It's the everyday drink, rustic, nourishing, and affordable. It's the fuel of the working man, the taste of the countryside. Then she gestures towards a group of townsfolk, perhaps shopkeepers or clerks. Their Tej is more translucent, a sign that it has been allowed to sit longer, so that some of the yeast and sediment has settled out. This is the common edge you defined in most Tej Bets. It's the social lubricant of the urban middle class, well made, balanced, and the backbone of the Tej economy. It represents a certain level of disposable income and leisure time. Finally, she directs your attention to the cup of the wealthy merchant. The liquid is a pristine, pale gold. This is the prize, the filtered Tej, known as Derrick. Achieving this clarity is a labor minus, intensive in time, minus consuming process. After the main fermentation is complete, the Tej is left to age for weeks or even months in a sealed container. During this time, the suspended yeast particles, proteins from the honey, and fine sediment from the Gesho slowly, painstakingly fall to the bottom. The clear liquid is then carefully siphoned off, or wrecked, into a new container, leaving the sediment behind. This process might be repeated several times to achieve maximum clarity. This is the key knowledge point. The difference between cloudy and clear Tej is not necessarily a difference in fundamental ingredients, but a difference in time, labor, and patience. Filtering makes the Tej smoother, more stable, and often more potent, as the extended aging allows the flavors to meld and mature. But it is a luxury. Every time you wreck the Tej, you lose a small amount of volume. The process ties up the brewer's fermentation vessels and her inventory. Therefore, filtered Tej is, by necessity, more expensive and carries a much higher status. It is the drink of the elite, of the imperial court, of wealthy merchants, and of very special occasions. Here we can drop in a great, specific detail about the traditional clarification process. Before modern filtration technologies, brewers had their own tricks to speed up clarification. One such technique was to add a small amount of finely crushed, toasted chickpeas, or even, in some recipes, a tiny bit of egg white into the brew. These agents would bind with the suspended particles, making them heavier and causing them to sink to the bottom more quickly. It's a form of fining, a technique used by wine makers and brewers all over the world, discovered and perfected here using local ingredients. The social meaning of these different grades of Tej has been a rich field of study for anthropologists, and it's not without its academic debates. Is the preference for clear Tej a purely aesthetic choice, a desire for a purer product, or does it reflect a deeper social anxiety, a desire by the elite to distinguish themselves from the common folk? Some scholars argue that in many cultures, refined, pale-colored foods and drinks like white sugar become status symbols, precisely because they require more labor and resources to produce, visually distancing the consumer from the raw, earthy products of the field. The clarity of the Tej, in this view, is a visible performance of social class. As you stand there, observing the scene, it's like you've been given a special lens. You can now read the social dynamics of the room just by looking at what's in people's glasses. A man offering a friend a sip of his direct Tej is making a generous, status-affirming gesture. A family celebrating a small victory with a shared jug of semi-clear, mid-grade Tej is displaying their modest prosperity. The group of friends laughing over their cloudy berzee are participating in the simple, unpretentious joy of the everyday. The brewer gives you a knowing smile. She understands this language better than anyone. Her skill lies in her ability to produce all these grades, to cater to all levels of society. She can make the quick, cloudy brew for the daily drinker and the patient. Christine Derrick for a wealthy patron's wedding. Her cellar is a liquid reflection of the community she serves. You take another look at the glasses around you, seeing not just honey wine, but a visible, drinkable social hierarchy, a story of class and aspiration told in shades of gold. The bustling social scene gives way to an intimate, fragrant setting. You are seated at a low table, the kind you saw in the Tej Bet, but this time it is laden with food. In the center of the table is a massive, communal platter, lined with a layer of grayish, spongy, crepe-like bread. This is injera, the undisputed foundation of every Ethiopian meal. Atop the injera are artfully arranged mounds of colorful stews and vegetables, called wats. There's the deep, rich reed of a spicy chicken stew, the vibrant green of collard greens, the bright yellow of a mild split pea puree, and the earthy brown of a lentil stew. The aroma is a complex and tantalizing symphony of spices, the warmth of berberry, the pungency of garlic and ginger, the subtle notes of cardamom and fenugreek. Your host tears off a piece of injera with his right hand. Eating is always done with the right hand and expertly scoops up a bit of the fiery chicken stew. He then does something remarkable. Instead of eating it himself, he reaches across the table and places the morsel directly into your mouth. This is a an intimate and profound gesture of hospitality, friendship, and respect. It's a bit startling at first, but you accept it graciously. The flavors explode on your tongue. The injera is tangerine sour, a perfect counterpoint to the rich, spicy, and deeply savory chicken. Now, a reel of Tej is placed beside your right hand. You take a sip. The honey wine is cool, semi-sweet, and cleansing, and in that moment, you have a culinary epiphany. You understand, on a visceral level, that Tej is not just a drink to be enjoyed on its own. It is the perfect, divinely inspired culinary partner for Ethiopian cuisine. This is the core principle. The flavors of the food and the flavor of the wine are in a beautiful, intricate dance. Let's break down this pairing. Ethiopian food, particularly the stews seasoned with the famous berber spice blend, is known for its heat. The spice is not just about raw power. It's a complex, warm, and lingering heat. The Tej, with its residual sweetness from the honey, acts as a perfect fire extinguisher. The sweetness coats the palate, soothing the burn of the chilies and allowing you to appreciate the other, more subtle spices in the dish. It's a classic sweet minus and minus spicy pairing, a dynamic duo that chefs and food lovers cherish. But the relationship is more complex than that. The most distinctive feature of injera is its sourness, which comes from a few days of fermentation of its teff flour batter. This tangy, almost lemony flavor brightens all the rich, earthy stews. The tej, which also has its own tangy notes from its own fermentation process, complements this sourness beautifully. The two fermented products speak the same language, creating a harmonious and layered taste experience. The honey wind doesn't just cut the spice, it bridges the gap between the sour bread and the savory stews. And here's a wonderful, slightly nerdy flavor minus science tidbit for you. The bitter notes in tej, which come from the Gesho, play a crucial role as well. Bitterness is a palate cleanser. A sip of tej after a mouthful of rich, oily stew scrubs your taste buds clean, cutting through the fat and getting you ready for the next bite. This is why a meal with tej feels less heavy. You can eat more, enjoy more, because the drink is constantly refreshing your palate. So you have a trifecta of flavor dynamics: sweet cuts the spice, sour complements sour, and bitter cleanses the richness. It's a perfectly balanced system. Of course, like any great culinary tradition, there are no absolute rules, and there is room for academic discussion. Food historians and culinary experts might debate which specific type of tej pairs best with which specific dish. A very sweet, young tej might be better with an extremely spicy dorowat, while the drier, more aged derrick tej might be a more elegant accompaniment to a milder vegetable dish. The perfect pairing is subjective, varying from region to region, from family to family, and from palate to palate. It's a living, evolving conversation, not a static rulebook. You continue the meal, now feeding yourself, tearing your own pieces of injera and sampling the different stews. Each bite of food is a new discovery, and each sip of tej offers a moment of sweet, cleansing relief before the next adventure. The meal is a slow, communal, and incredibly satisfying experience. There are no individual plates, no forks or knives. Everyone eats from the same platter, a practice that fosters a deep sense of connection and sharing. You realize that TJ's place in Ethiopian culture is not just social, or religious, or ceremonial. It is fundamentally culinary. It evolved alongside the food, each one shaping the other over centuries. To have Ethiopian food without tej is to have an incomplete experience. The wine is the missing piece of the puzzle, the key that unlocks the full spectrum of flavors. It's the final, perfect brushstroke on a masterpiece of flavor. You take one last bite, followed by a final sip of the golden honey wine, feeling a deep sense of contentment. You have just tasted the soul of a nation on a single plate, and in a single glass. The warm, communal intimacy of the shared meal dissolves, and you find yourself in a different, more solitary setting. You are hunched over a rough hewn wooden table in a dusty, sun-drenched encampment. The air is hot and dry. You are no longer experiencing this world as a native, but through the eyes of a foreigner. You are the European traveler, perhaps a Portuguese Jesuit missionary in the 16th century, a Scottish explorer in the 18th, or a British diplomat in the 19th. You hold a quill pen, dipping it into a pot of ink, and in a leather-bound journal. You attempt to describe the strange and fascinating new world you've encountered. You write about the majestic, rock-hewn churches, the powerful kings in their mountain fortresses, and the unique Christian traditions that have survived for so long in isolation. You describe the people, their customs, their food, and then you try to describe their drink. You dip your pen again, searching for the right words to convey this potent honey wine to an audience back home who has never tasted anything quite like it. Your journal entry might read something like this: they drink a sort of mead, which they call tej. It is made from honey and water, with the addition of certain bitter sticks which they say give it strength. The common sort is cloudy and thick, but the nobles drink a version, that is as clear as any canary wine. It is deceptively sweet upon first taste, but it possesses a surprising potency that can quickly steal a man's senses if he is not wary. They consume it in great quantities at their feasts, from strange glass flasks with long necks, and it seems to be the very lifeblood of their social congress. This is how Tej first entered the written historical record for the outside world through the curious, often confused, but fascinated diaries and letters of foreign travelers. These accounts are invaluable to historians, as they provide an outsider's perspective on a culture that, for much of its history, was quite insular. They notice details that a local might have taken for granted. One of the most famous of these early accounts comes from Father Francisco Alvares, a Portuguese priest who spent 6 years in Ethiopia in the early 1522s. He was part of a diplomatic mission and wrote a detailed book about his experiences. His descriptions of the imperial court, the religious ceremonies, and the daily life of the people are some of our most important sources for that period. And, of course, he wrote about Tej. He described the elaborate brewing process he witnessed and the vast quantities consumed at the emperor's banquets, confirming the drink's central role in courtly life. Here's a specific, quirky detail that often appears in these early accounts. Many European travelers compared Tej not to other meads, but to white wine or cider. This is because the flavor profile, with its balance of sweetness, acidity, and bitterness from the Gesho, was more complex than the simple, often cloyingly sweet honey wines they might have been familiar with in Europe. The Gesho was the mystery ingredient they couldn't quite place. They knew it was a bittering agent, but they didn't understand its crucial role in fermentation. They often described it with a sense of scientific curiosity, as a peculiar local botanical specimen. However, these travelers' accounts must be read with a critical eye, and this is where the academic debate comes in. Historians must constantly ask what were the biases of the writer. These were men of their time, often with a sense of European cultural superiority. Their descriptions can be tinged with condescension or exoticist. They might describe a Tej-fueled feast as a scene of drunken debauchery rather than as a legitimate and complex social ritual. They were interpreting Ethiopian culture through their own cultural lens, and their understanding was often incomplete. For example, they saw the Azim as mere jesters or drunkards, failing to grasp their sophisticated role as social commentators. Therefore, the work of a modern historian is to cross-reference these foreign accounts with local Ethiopian sources, royal chronicles, religious texts, and oral traditions to build a more balanced and nuanced picture. The European diary might give you a vivid, colorful description of a wedding feast, but the Ethiopian oral tradition gives you the meaning of the Gesho or Shah. The Scottish explorer might describe the chemical properties of the Tej, but the local brewer's song gives you its soul. You look down at the page you've written in your imaginary journal. The words feel inadequate. How can you truly capture the taste of the wildflowers, the buzz of the Tej Bet, the solemnity of the wedding toast? You are an outsider looking in, documenting the what but struggling to grasp the why. Your account is a snapshot, a valuable but frozen moment in time. These early travelogues are like dusty windows into the past. They are not perfectly clear, and they are colored by the perspective of the person peering through. But they were the first bridge between Ethiopia and the wider world. They put this ancient kingdom and its unique honey wine on the map. They sparked curiosity and paved the way for future study. Your journal entry, with all its limitations, is a vital piece of the puzzle. A first draft of a story that others will continue to write and revise for centuries to come. The dusty, solitary tent of the European explorer dissolves, and you find yourself in a world that feels both familiar and jarringly different. It's the 20th century. The city around you has the recognizable shapes of modern buildings, but there are also soldiers in unfamiliar uniforms patrolling the streets. The language you overhear is a mixture of Amharic and Italian. You are in Addis Ababa during the Italian occupation, a brief but deeply traumatic period from 1936 to 1941. The air is tense with a mixture of quiet defiance and the grim reality of foreign rule. You find your way to a familiar place, a Tej Bet. From the outside, it looks the same, but as you step inside, you can feel the change. The boisterous, carefree laughter has been replaced by a more subdued, watchful atmosphere. The conversations are in hushed tones. People still gather, because the need for community is stronger than ever. But there is a shadow hanging over the room. This is a place for quiet solidarity, for sharing news whispered from the resistance, for maintaining a sense of normalcy in an abnormal world. In this context, the act of drinking Tej becomes more than just a social custom. It becomes a subtle, powerful act of cultural resistance. The Italian occupiers brought with them their own food and their own drinks, their pasta, their chianti, their grappa. They established their own cafes and bars, attempting to superimpose their own culture onto the city. For an Ethiopian to choose to go to a Tej Bet, to drink the traditional honey wine from a biril, to eat injera and what, was a quiet but firm statement: we are still here, we are still ourselves. This is a key historical point about culture under occupation. Resistance is not always about taking up arms. It is also about the preservation of one's identity, language, and traditions in the face of a power that seeks to erase them. The Tej Bet, the coffee ceremony, the Orthodox Church, these became cultural fortresses, spaces where Ethiopian identity could be nurtured and kept alive when it was under direct assault. The familiar taste of Tej was a taste of home, a taste of freedom, a taste of a time before the invasion. Of course, the occupation had a direct and practical impact on the production of Tej itself. Here's a specific, lesser-minus known detail: the Italian administration sought to control and modernize the Ethiopian economy for its own benefit. This included attempts to regulate agriculture and production. Resources like grain and honey may have been diverted or controlled by the occupying forces, potentially making it harder for small, independent brewers to source their ingredients. The price of honey might have gone up. The simple act of brewing a batch of Tej could have become a small act of economic defiance, participation in a shadow economy outside the control of the foreign rulers. The nature of cultural resistance during the occupation is a complex topic, and historians are still untangling its many threads. How effective was this soft resistance compared to the armed struggle being waged by the Arbeg, not the patriots in the countryside? Some historians argue that these everyday acts of cultural preservation were the bedrock that supported the entire resistance movement, providing the moral and psychological strength for the nation to endure. Others might take a more cynical view, suggesting that allowing such cultural outlets to exist was a deliberate strategy by the occupiers, a way to provide a harmless safety valve for public frustration that didn't threaten their overall control. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in between. In the Tej Bet, you watch an old man in the corner, slowly sipping his honey wine. His face is a mask of stoicism, but his eyes are sharp, missing nothing. He might be a former nobleman, his lands confiscated. He might be a father whose son has gone to the hills to fight. He comes here not just for the drink, but for the connection, to be surrounded by his people, to hear his language, to remember who he is. The Tej in his hand is a link to his ancestors, to the kings of Gondar and Aksum, to a legacy of independence that stretches back millennia. It's a liquid reminder that this occupation, too, shall pass. An Azimari might be playing in the corner, but his songs are different now. The waxing gold is more important than ever. A song that sounds like a simple lament for a lost love might be a carefully coded gold allegory for the loss of national sovereignty. The audience understands. They nod silently. Their shared understanding a secret bond that the Italian soldiers patrolling outside can never break. You take a sip of your own Tej. It tastes different in this tense, quiet room. It tastes of resilience, of sorrow, of quiet pride. and of an unbreakable hope. It is a taste of a nation holding its breath, waiting for the day of liberation. In this dark chapter of history, the golden wine becomes a small, flickering candle of cultural identity, a quiet promise that the true Ethiopia will endure. The tense atmosphere of the Italian occupation lifts, but the world you find yourself in is not the vibrant, boisterous one you might expect. The colors feel muted, the energy subdued. You are in Addis Ababa again, but this is the 1970 seconds on 80 seconds, the era of the dirge, following the overthrow of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974. Ethiopia was plunged into a period of dramatic and often brutal change under a Marxist-Leninist military junta. This was a time of civil war, famine, and severe political repression. The grand imperial feasts are a distant memory, and the joyous wedding celebrations are scaled back, if they happen at all. You walk down a city street. The mood is austere. Long lines snake from shops selling basic necessities. The revolutionary slogans painted on the walls stand in stark contrast to the weary faces of the people. In this new world, everything is political. The state has inserted itself into every aspect of life. What does a place of simple, communal joy like the Tej Bet do in such a time? You push open the familiar door. The Tej Bet is still here, a stubborn survivor, but it is profoundly changed. The room is sparsely populated. The fragrant grasses on the floor might be gone, and an affordable luxury. The proprietor looks worried, her smiles less frequent. The primary struggle is economic. The dirge's nationalization policies and the disruptions of war made basic ingredients scarce and expensive. Honey, the soul of Tej, became a precious commodity. The quality and availability of the drink suffered. The Tej you are served might be weaker, made with less honey, or fermented for a shorter time. It is a shadow of its former self, a drink of scarcity. This period highlights a crucial aspect of TEJ's history, its direct connection to the economic and political health of the nation. When the country prospers, the Tej flows freely, and its quality is high. When the country suffers, the Tej suffers with it. The honey wine in your Be Real becomes a barometer of the times, its taste reflecting the hardship of the era. But the challenges were not just economic, they were ideological. The dirge regime was deeply suspicious of any private enterprise or social gathering that it did not control. The Tej Bet, as a privately mined, its own business and a traditional hub for gossip, free minus wheeling conversation, and potential dissent, was a target of suspicion. The regime established its own state-controlled social centers, called Kebiles, which were also centers of surveillance. People became afraid to speak freely, even among friends. The wax and gold lyrics of the Azimari, once a playful art form, were now a dangerous liability. A hidden meaning interpreted as counter-Midas revolutionary could land a singer in prison. Herein lies a specific, poignant detail of the era, the change in the social function of the Tej Bet. It transformed from a place of open, boisterous community into a space for quiet, trusted communion. You would only go with your closest, most reliable friends. The room was no longer a microcosm of society, but a small bubble of trusted relationships. The hushed conversations were not just about avoiding the ears of the state. They were about sharing the genuine burdens of the time, worrying about a family member conscripted into the army, or sharing information on where to find food. The Tej, as weak as it might have been, was a catalyst for quiet empathy and mutual support. The history of daily life under the dirge is still being written, and it is a subject of intense and often painful debate among Ethiopians and historians. How did ordinary people navigate the constant fear and scarcity? To what extent were traditional institutions like the Tej Bet able to maintain their cultural significance in the face of an all-powerful state? Some scholars emphasize the crushing power of the regime and the erosion of civil society. They would point to the decline of the Tej Bet as a symbol of this cultural loss. Others, however, focus on the resilience of the human spirit. They argue that in private spaces, behind closed doors, people found ways to adapt, to maintain their social bonds, and to carve out small pockets of normalcy. In this view, the survival of the Tej Bet, even in its diminished form, is a powerful testament to the enduring need for community, a need that no political ideology can completely extinguish. You look around the quiet, sparsely filled room, then all days. Imari might be there, but he's not performing. He's just a customer now, quietly nursing his drink. His Mazinkyo is at home, its voice silenced by the political climate. The joy has been replaced by a quiet, shared entrance. The proprietor brings you a small plate of kolo, the roasted barley, a gesture of hospitality that has survived even these hard times. The tej in your hand tastes thin, but it is still recognizably tej. It is a ghost of the drink from more prosperous times, but its spirit is still there. It's the taste of survival, of a culture refusing to be completely erased. It's a quiet promise, sipped in the shadows, that sweeter times might one day return. In this era of red terror and austerity, the golden wine is a pale, watery thing, but it is still gold nonetheless. The austere, fearful quiet of the dirge era recedes, and you are transported to a place of bright lights and humming machinery. The air no longer smells of honey and yeast, but of antiseptic cleanliness. You are in a modern laboratory. Stainless steel vats have replaced the clay and syrah. Scientists in white coats have replaced the traditional female brewer. Microscopes and petri dishes are the new tools of the trade, replacing the sensory wisdom of taste, touch, and smell. Here, in this clinical environment, you are finally going to unmask the scientific secret of TJ's most enigmatic ingredient, the GESHO plant. For centuries, the role of GESHO was understood through tradition and observation. It made the brew bitter. It made the brew bubble. It was simply how it was done. But now, modern science is peeling back the layers of this folk wisdom to understand the complex biochemistry at play. A scientist gestures for you to look through the lens of a powerful microscope. On the slide is a sample taken from the bark of a GESHO stem. What you see is a bustling, diverse ecosystem of microscopic life. The dominant organisms are ovoid-shaped cells, some of them budding to create new cells. These are the primary engines of fermentation yeasts, most notably strains of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same species used to make bread and beer all over the world. This is the first major scientific confirmation of the traditional brewer's wisdom. The GESHO stick is, in essence, a natural, pre-packaged yeast starter. The plant's bark provides the perfect environment for these wild yeasts to thrive, waiting for a sugary bath to awaken them. The scientist explains that the specific strains of yeast found on GESHO in different regions of Ethiopia can vary, which contributes to the subtle regional differences in the flavor of tej. This is a core piece of modern knowledge that validates ancient practice. But the science goes deeper. The scientist now shows you a chemical analysis of GESHO leaves. The printout shows a complex array of organic compounds. This is where we get into a really cool, specific scientific insight. The primary compounds responsible for the bitterness are a class of flavonoids and polyphenols. These are the same types of compounds that give bitterness to hops in beer or tannins to red wine. But GESHO contains a unique cocktail of these compounds, which is why its bitterness is so distinctive, earthy and durable, rather than sharp or floral like many hops. Even more fascinating is the discovery that some of these compounds have natural and time-breakable properties. This explains another piece of the puzzle, why GESHO helps prevent spoilage. It creates an environment where the desired Saccharomyces yeast can thrive, but it inhibits the growth of certain unwanted bacteria that could sour the brew or produce off-minus flavors. So, the GESHO doesn't just start the party, it acts as the bouncer, ensuring only the right guests get in. It is both a fermentation aid and a preservative, a dual function that makes it a truly remarkable brewing ingredient. Of course, the scientific exploration of Gesho is an ongoing field, and it's not without its academic questions and debates. Botanists and chemists are still working to fully map the genetic diversity of the Ramensprinoides plant across Africa. Are the Gesho plants in the Gondar region biochemically different from those in the south? And how does that translate to the final product? Furthermore, food scientists are debating the role of other non-saccharose yeasts and even certain bacteria that are also present on the Gesho sticks. Do these other microbes play a small but crucial role in the early stages of fermentation, creating precursor compounds that the main yeast then transforms? The traditional tej you drink from a clay pot is likely the result of a complex succession of different microbes, a wild dance that is far more complex than the monoculture fermentation of a modern commercial brewery. Unraveling this microbial terror is the new frontier of tej research. The scientist takes you to a pilot brewery in the lab. Here, they are experimenting with pure, isolated strains of yeast cultured from Gesho. They brew a batch of honey wine with this single yeast strain. Then they brew another, adding a purified extract of the bittering compounds from the leaves. By separating the two functions of the Gesho yeast and the bitterness, they can control the process with incredible precision. The resulting tej is clean, consistent, and predictable. But as you taste this scientifically perfected tej, you might notice something is missing. It's technically flawless, but it lacks a certain that wild, unpredictable, slightly funky character that comes from the messy, complex reality of a traditional fermentation. It lacks the fingerprint of the brewer, the spirit of the village, the magic of the clay pot. You leave the sterile lab and its gleaming steel. You have a newfound, profound respect for the Gesho plant. It is not magic, but it is a marvel of natural engineering, and you have an even deeper respect for the generations of brewers who, without microscopes or chemical analyzers, managed to harness its complex properties through pure observation, patience, and intuition. They were scientists in their own right, conducting experiments in their kitchens for centuries. The lab has unmasked the secret of the Gesho, but in doing so, it has only deepened the mystery and the beauty of the traditional art. The sterile, controlled environment of the laboratory fades, and you find yourself in a place of transit. You are in a bustling, modern airport terminal. The signs are not in Amharic, but in English, French, or German. The air is filled with the standardized, place-less scent of jet fuel and floor cleaner. This is a scene of departure and arrival, of farewells and reunions. You are witnessing a pivotal chapter in the story of Tej, a chapter that takes place far from the highlands of Ethiopia. You are following the journey of Ethiopian immigrants and refugees as they build new lives abroad. This migration, particularly after the turmoil of the Derg regime, created a global diaspora. People left their homeland, but they did not leave their culture behind. They packed it in their suitcases and carried it in their hearts. They brought their language, their music, their faith, and, of course, their food and drink. In the apartment buildings of Washington, D.C., the suburbs of Toronto, or the neighborhoods of London, a familiar scent began to waft from kitchens, the spicy aroma of Burberry and the sweet, fermenting smell of honey. You find yourself in the cozy, warmly lit living room of a small apartment in a cold, northern city. Outside, snow might be falling, a stark contrast to the sun-baked landscapes of home. Inside, a group of Ethiopian friends are gathered. They are laughing, sharing stories, catching up on news from back home and navigating the challenges of their new lives. And on the coffee table, in the center of it all, is a large bowl of kolo and several familiar be-real flasks, filled with a golden liquid. Someone in this community has taken up the sacred task of brewing tej. This is the crucial role of food and drink in the immigrant experience. It is a powerful link to a past that feels increasingly distant. The taste of home-made tej is more than just a pleasant sensation. It's an act of memory, a way to conjure the warmth of the Tej Bet, the joy of a family wedding, the very essence of a home they can no longer touch. It's a delicious cure for homesickness, for the children of these immigrants, who may have been born in this new country. Tasting tej might be one of their first and most tangible connections to their Ethiopian heritage. But brewing tej in a new and comes with a whole new set of challenges. This is a fantastic, specific detail about the diaspora experience. The ingredients are not the same. The rich, complex, wildflower honey from Ethiopia is replaced by clover or orange blossom honey from a local supermarket. The water, filtered and treated, is different from the pure spring water of the highlands. But the biggest challenge of all is the Gesho. The sacred plant does not grow in these cold climates. So how do they solve this? The diaspora community has developed its own resilient supply chains. Someone traveling back to Ethiopia will be tasked with bringing back a suitcase filled with dried Gesho leaves and stems, which are then distributed among the community's brewers. Or, an enterprising immigrant will start a small import business, selling dried Gesho and other essential Ethiopian spices out of a small grocery store or online. Finding a reliable source for real Gesho becomes a quest, a vital link in the chain of cultural preservation. This necessity has led to adaptation and innovation, and it's a topic that fascinates food historians and anthropologists. What happens to a traditional recipe when it's taken out of its native context? Some diaspora brewers stick as closely to tradition as possible, seeking out the authentic ingredients at any cost. Others begin to experiment. Lacking Gesho, might they try using hops or another bittering herb to balance the sweetness? How does the flavor of the local honey change the final product? Does a tej made in Virginia taste different from one made in Melbourne? The answer is yes. This process creates new, regional variations of tej, a diaspora terroir that is a living, evolving testament to the culture's adaptability. This is a debate in the making. Are these new variations still authentic, or are they a new creation entirely? You watch the friends in the living room. An elder is telling a story, and the younger generation is listening, sometimes asking for a word to be translated. The tej is passed around, and with each sip, the bonds of community are strengthened. This small, informal gathering is a recreation of the Tej Bet 1,000 miles from home. It's a space where the culture is not just remembered, but actively performed and passed on to the next generation. This act of brewing and sharing tej in a new country is a declaration. It's a refusal to assimilate completely, a refusal to forget. It's a way of planting a flag, of saying, we are Ethiopian, and this is our taste of home. The golden liquid in the Be Real is no longer just honey wine. It is liquid memory, liquid identity, a sweet and potent symbol of resilience and the unbreakable bond of a community scattered across the globe. The cozy, private living room of the diaspora dissolves, and you find yourself back on the vibrant, noisy streets of a modern, bustling city. But this is not the Addis Ababa of the dirge or the Italian occupation. This is the Addis Ababa of today. The city is a dynamic mix of old and new. Gleaming glass skyscrapers rise next to traditional neighborhoods. The sound of construction and the honking of blue and white Lada taxis fills the air. The city is growing, changing, and rushing headlong into the 21st century. What has become of the humble, traditional Tej Bet in this new Ethiopia? You turn a corner off a busy main street and find one. The sign is still modest, but it might be brightly painted, perhaps with a professionally designed logo. You push open the door, and the familiar, sweet scent of honey wine greets you like an old friend. The space inside, however, is a fascinating blend of tradition and modernity. The low wooden stools and fragrant grasses on the floor might still be there, a comforting nod to the past. But now, there might be a sleek, modern bar at one end of the room. The walls might be adorned not with faded posters, but with contemporary Ethiopian art. And in the corner, where the Azimari once sat, there might be a flat-minus screened TV showing a football match, or even a DJ playing the latest Ethio- jazz fusion music. The crowd is different, too. It's a vibrant cross- section of the new Addis. You see a group of young university students scrolling on their smartphones while they sip their tej. You see businesswomen in sharp suits having an after-work drink. You see tourists, guidebooks in hand, eagerly trying the national drink for the first time. The Tej Bet is no longer just a neighborhood institution. It has become a cultural destination, a place that must cater to a wider, more globalized audience. The Tej itself reflects this change. The proprietor offers you a menu, a modern innovation. On it, you see the familiar choices: the cloudy, unfiltered housed edge and the clear, filtered derrick. But now, there might be other options. This is a great, specific piece of information about the modern scene. You might see Tej cocktails, where the honey wine is mixed with fruit juice or spirits. You might see flavored Tej, infused with ginger or other spices. The Be Real is still the vessel of choice for traditionalists, but some patrons might be drinking their Tej from standard wine glasses. The modern Tej Bet has to walk a fine line. It has to preserve the authentic, traditional experience that people cherish, while also adapting to the tastes and expectations of a new generation. The proprietor is not just a brewer anymore. She is a savvy business owner navigating a competitive market. She has to think about branding, marketing, and maybe even her establishment's Instagram presence. This evolution has sparked a lively debate among Ethiopians and cultural observers. Is this modernization a good thing? A necessary adaptation that keeps the tradition alive and relevant? Or is it a form of dilution, a watering down of an ancient custom for commercial purposes? Some purists might argue that a real Tej Bet shouldn't have a television or serve cocktails. They might see the changes as a loss of authenticity, a pandering to foreign tastes. They long for the good old days of the simple, no-frills drinking house. On the other side of the debate, people argue that culture is not a museum piece. It must be a living, breathing thing that changes with the times. They would say that the modern Tej Bet is a sign of a confident, dynamic culture, one that is not afraid to innovate and engage with the modern world. The young people drinking Tej cocktails are not disrespecting tradition. They are creating their own version of it, ensuring that the honey wine will be enjoyed by their generation and the next. This is how traditions avoid becoming relics. You order a traditional, unfiltered Tej, and it arrives in a classic Be Real. The taste is just as you remember: sweet, sour, complex, and comforting. The core of the experience is unchanged. The conversations around you are still lively. The atmosphere is still communal. The students may be on their phones, but they are still talking and laughing with each other. The businesswomen are closing a deal, just as merchants did in the same kind of establishment centuries ago. The fundamental function of the Tej Bet remains the same. It is a third space, a place for the community to gather, to relax, to connect. The decorations have changed. The soundtrack is different, but the soul of the place endures. It has successfully adapted to a new century, proving its resilience once again. The modern Tej Bet is a testament to the enduring power of this simple honey wine to bring people together. Whether they are discussing village gossip or the global stock market, whether they are listening to an Azimari's lute or the latest pop hit, it is the taste of a nation that is proud of its past and excited about its future. The vibrant, noisy Tej Bet fades, and you find yourself in a place that feels both modern and deeply traditional. You're in a small, clean, and efficient bottling facility on the outskirts of Addis Ababa. This is the next logical step in the evolution you've been witnessing. The air smells of sterilizing solution and cardboard boxes, but underneath it all, you can still catch the faint, sweet scent of honey. Here, Tej is making its final leap from a homemade craft, a hyper-minus local product, into a commercial, shelf-minus stable good, ready to be sold in supermarkets across the country and, perhaps, the world. A young entrepreneur, maybe the granddaughter of a traditional brewer, is showing you around her facility. She is passionate and knowledgeable, talking about her brand and market share, a vocabulary that would have been foreign to her ancestors, but she also speaks with deep respect for the tradition she is trying to package. In a temperature-minus controlled room, large stainless-minus steel tanks hold hundreds of gallons of fermenting honey wine. It's a scaled-minus-up version of the clay in Syrah, but the fundamental process is the same. She shows you her bottling line. A machine fills sterilized glass bottles, not less, but standard wine bottles with screw caps or corks with crystal-clear, filtered Tej. Another machine slaps on a beautifully designed label. The label might feature images of the Ethiopian highlands, a drawing of a bee, or the iconic shape of a bee reel. The name of the brand might evoke history and royalty, something like Sheba's nectar or Gondar gold. This is the core of commercialization, turning a story, a tradition, into a marketable brand. The biggest challenge for this entrepreneur is a familiar one: consistency. A customer who buys a bottle of her Tej in a supermarket expects it to taste exactly the same as the bottle they bought last month. This is a radical departure from the world of homemade Tej, where every batch was unique. To achieve this, she has to control every variable. She sources her honey from a specific coal mine, a sop of beekeepers, to ensure consistent flavor profile. She uses a specific, isolated strain of yeast, perhaps cultured in the very lab you visited earlier. She has precise, scientific control over fermentation temperatures and timing. Here is a great, specific detail about this commercialization process. One of the main technical hurdles is making the Tej shelf-stable. Traditional Tej is a living product, often still lightly fermenting, to be sold in a store. It needs to be pasteurized or treated with preservatives to stop the fermentation and prevent the bottle from exploding on the shelf. This process, however, can subtly change the flavor, cooking some of the delicate honey notes. The entrepreneur is constantly experimenting, trying to find the perfect balance between safety and stability on one hand, and the authentic, live taste of traditional Tej on the other. This move towards commercial production has, predictably, created a new set of debates. Is something essential lost when Tej is put in a wine bottle and sold in a store? The purists would argue yes. They'd say that commercial Tej, with its pasteurization and scientific precision, lacks the soul of the homemade brew. They would miss the slight variations, the terroir of a specific brewer's kitchen, the direct connection between the maker and the drinker. For them, Tej is not just a product, it's a process, an experience, and you can't put that in a bottle. On the other hand, the proponents of commercialization see it as a vital step forward. They argue that it creates jobs, supports the honey industry on a larger scale, and introduces Tej to a new and wider audience who might never set foot in a traditional Tej Bet. They see it as a way to preserve the tradition by making it economically viable in the 21st century. This young entrepreneur isn't killing the tradition. She's giving it a new kind of life, allowing it to compete in a modern marketplace. She is an ambassador for her culture, introducing the taste of Ethiopia to the world, one bottle at a time. You follow a pallet of freshly boxed Tej as it's loaded onto a truck. Some of it is destined for upscale hotels in Addis Ababa, where tourists will get their first taste of honey wine. Some will go to local supermarkets, to be bought by families for their own celebrations at home. And a small, precious shipment might be headed for the airport, destined for export to that diaspora grocery store in Washington, D.C. or London. The journey you've been on, from the ancient beehive and the acacia tree to this modern bottling plant, has been a long one. You've seen Tej as a royal gift, a sacred sacrament, a social lubricant, and a symbol of resistance. Now, it is also a commercial product, an SKU in an inventory system. It seems like a dramatic transformation, but perhaps it's just another chapter in the story of adaptation. The clay pot and the stainless minus steel tank are different, but the golden liquid they hold still carries the same fundamental story, a story of bees, flowers, and the sweet, enduring spirit of a nation. The bottling facility, with its focus on the Ethiopian market, shrinks in the rearview mirror, and your perspective pulls back, way back, until you can see the entire globe. The story of Tej is no longer confined to Ethiopia or its diaspora. The golden thread has now woven itself into a much larger, global tapestry. You are witnessing the final, and perhaps most unexpected, chapter of this journey, how this ancient Ethiopian drink is inspiring a worldwide renaissance in its long minus lost cousin, mead. You find yourself in a trendy, industrial minus chic tasting room, but it's not in Addis Ababa. It could be in San Diego, California, or Austin, Texas, or even a hip neighborhood in a Scandinavian capital. The people here are young, bearded, and passionate about craft beverages, but they're not drinking beer. They are drinking mead. For centuries, in the West, mead was largely a relic, a drink of Renaissance fairs and fantasy novels. But now, it's making a serious comeback, driven by the same craft ethos that revolutionized beer and cider. And many of these innovative new mead makers are looking to Ethiopia for inspiration. A young, enthusiastic mead maker, the kind of person who obsesses over yeast, strains, and honey varietals, pours you a flight of his creations. One of them, he explains with excitement, is his Ethiopian minus style mead. He calls it a Tej minus inspired brag got or something similar. He proudly tells you he managed to source authentic Gesho from an importer, and he used a floral, wild minus blossom honey to replicate the flavors of the highlands. You take a sip. It's a fascinating interpretation. It has the characteristic bitterness of the Gesho in the familiar honey base, but it's also different. It might be carbonated, giving it a beer minus-like fizziness. The honey might be from American or Inch blossoms, giving it a citrusy note that's not found in traditional Tej. It is an homage, a respectful tribute, not a direct copy. This is a key point. Global craft brewers are not trying to replace Tej. They are learning from its techniques to expand the vocabulary of what mead can be. For generations, the standard Western conception of mead was often a simple, very sweet drink made from just honey, water, and yeast. The Ethiopian tradition, with its use of a bittering agent like Gesho, was a revelation to these new brewers. It introduced the idea of a balanced, bitter, more complex mead. It broke them out of the sweet, dessert wine box and opened up a whole new world of flavor possibilities. This is Tej's great contribution to the global craft beverage scene. It reminded the world that mead doesn't have to be one-minus dimensional. Here's a specific, concrete example of this influence. Modern craft mead makers are now widely experimenting with bittering agents, a practice directly inspired by Gesho. They might not use Gesho itself, but they will add hops, herbs, or spices like heather tips or yarrow to their meads to create that crucial balancing bitterness. They are applying the core principle of Tej, balancing sweetness with bitterness using their own local ingredients. The technique has gone global. Of course, this cross-minus cultural pollination raises interesting questions and, naturally, some debate. This time, the debate is about authenticity and appropriation. When an American mead maker brews a Tej minus style beverage, is it a respectful tribute or a form of cultural appropriation? Does it benefit the Ethiopian culture that originated the drink? Or does it simply profit from a cool, exotic story? The most ethical brewers are very conscious of this. They will make a point to credit the Ethiopian tradition on their labels and websites. They might even partner with Ethiopian beekeeping cooperatives or donate a portion of their profits to development projects in the country. They see themselves as students of the tradition, not its new owners. The discussion also revolves around terminology. Should they even call their product Tej? Many argue that they shouldn't. Tej, they contend, should be reserved for the authentic product made in Ethiopia or by Ethiopians in the diaspora, using the proper ingredients and traditional methods. The new creations should be called Tej-style or Gesho-spiced meat to respect the distinction. It's a debate about the ownership of a name and the story that comes with it. You look around the modern tasting room. The patrons are discussing the flavor notes of their mead with the same seriousness that Enophiles discuss wine. They talk about the herbal qualities of the Gesho and the finish of the wildflower honey. The ancient Ethiopian drink has found a new, appreciative, and slightly nerdy global audience. This is a beautiful, unexpected turn in our story. The journey that began in a humble beehive in the highlands has now come full circle. For centuries, Ethiopia was isolated, its traditions developing on their own. Now, its most beloved drink is reaching out across the oceans, not just as a product to be consumed, but as an idea to inspire. It is teaching the world a new way to think about an old drink. The golden thread of Tej, once a secret of the highlands, is now part of a global conversation, sparking creativity and connection in the most unlikely of places. The trendy, urban tasting room dissolves, and you find yourself back where our journey began, under the vast, brilliant blue sky of the Ethiopian highlands. The air is crisp and clean, and the familiar, gentle hum of bees is all around you. You are standing once again with a beekeeper, but the scene has changed. The ancient, gnarled acacia tree is still there. But now, in the fields beyond, you can see rows of neat, modern, box-style hives standing alongside the traditional woven cylinders lodged in the branches. This is a place where ancient tradition and modern challenges meet head-on. Our journey is nearing its end, and we must now contemplate the very source of it all, the bees, and the future of the honey they produce. The beekeeper, the young man who has inherited the craft from his father, shows you his work. He explains, through a translator, that the modern box hives are more efficient. They allow him to inspect the colony's health and harvest the honey without destroying the comb, leading to higher yields. This is essential, as the demand for honey is growing, both for the domestic Tej market and for international export. This is the positive side of the story. A renewed appreciation for Ethiopian honey is creating economic opportunities and encouraging sustainable beekeeping practices. But the beekeeper's face also shows a hint of worry. He points towards a distant hillside that is noticeably barer than the others, scarred by deforestation. This is the heart of the modern challenge. The future of Tej is inextricably linked to the future of the Ethiopian environment. The unique, complex flavors of Ethiopian honey come from the country's incredible biodiversity, the thousands of species of native wildflowers, shrubs, and trees. When these forests are cut down for firewood or to make way for agriculture, the bees lose their primary food source. This is a core concept in ecology and a vital point for our story. The health of the hive is a direct reflection of the health of the ecosystem. The beekeeper shares another concern. He talks about the changing patterns of the seasons. The rains that come too late or not at all. Climate change is no longer an abstract concept here. It's a tangible threat. Droughts can devastate the flowering plants, leading to a nectared earth, a time when there is simply not enough food for the bees. This not only reduces the honey harvest but can weaken and even kill entire colonies. The delicate, ancient rhythm between the bees, the flowers, and the seasons is being disrupted. Here we can touch on a very specific, contemporary issue, the threat of pesticides. As agriculture in Ethiopia modernizes, the use of chemical pesticides and herbicides is increasing. If these chemicals drift into the areas where bees are foraging, they can be lethal. The beekeeper is in a difficult position. He needs the neighboring farms to be productive, but he also needs them to not poison his bees. This tension between agricultural development and ecological preservation is a global problem, and it's playing out right here in the highlands. This complex situation has led to a crucial and ongoing debate among conservationists, government officials, and local communities. What is the best way forward? How can Ethiopia develop its economy without destroying the natural resources that make it so unique? Some argue for the creation of more protected national parks and biosphere reserves, creating safe havens for the bees and native flora. Others focus on education and outreach, working with farmers to promote bee-friendly farming practices, like planting hedgerows of native flowers and reducing pesticide use. And many believe the answer lies in economics by promoting high-value, single-origin Ethiopian honey on the global market. They can create a direct financial incentive to protect the forests where that honey is produced. If the trees are worth more standing than cut down, they will be protected. You walk with the beekeeper to one of his traditional hives. He gently smokes the bees and pulls out a chunk of dark, fragrant honeycomb. He hands it to you. It's the same gesture of hospitality you received at the very beginning of your journey. As you taste the honey, its complex, floral flavor seems more precious now. It's not just a taste of the landscape. It's a taste of a fragile ecosystem, a product of a delicate balance that is under threat. The future of Tej, the drink that has defined so much of Ethiopian culture, depends on the answer to these challenges. It depends on the survival of 1 million tiny flowers, on the health of 1 billion tiny bees, and on the wisdom of the people who are the guardians of this land. The golden liquid in the Be Real is not just a product of history and culture, but a product of a healthy environment. Its future is tied to the rains, the trees, and the collective will to preserve the incredible biodiversity of the Ethiopian highlands. The hum of the bees around you sounds less like a gentle lullaby and more like a quiet, urgent question. The hum of the bees in the highlands softens, and you are no longer in one specific time or place. You are in a quiet, timeless space, holding a single, perfect Be Real of Tej. The glass is cool in your hand. The liquid inside is a brilliant, clear gold, catching the light like a trapped piece of the sun. As you raise it, the aromas funnel up the narrow neck, the scent of 1,000 wildfires. The faint, earthy spice of Gesho. The clean, sweet perfume of pure honey. You are holding not just a drink, but the culmination of the entire journey. Every story, every era you have witnessed, is dissolved in this single glass. You take a sip. The first taste is the sweet gift of the Queen of Sheba, a taste of myth and legend, of diplomacy carried in a clay pot across the desert. It's the flavor of a nation's foundational story, a connection to a glorious, mythical past. Then, as the liquid settles on your tongue, you taste the power of the Aksumite Empire. It's the flavor of alliances forged in victories, toasted in grand stone palaces. It's the taste of a global power, a hub of trade and ideas, confident and strong, a drink cementing its place in the ancient world. A moment later, the subtle bitterness of the Gesho comes through, and you are in the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. This is the taste of faith, of a community turning inward to create wonders from the living stone. It's the flavor of devotion, of a drink finding its place not just in feasts, but in the rhythm of spiritual life, a humble pleasure in a holy place. The aftertaste is warm and communal, and you are instantly transported to the noisy, joyful chaos of the Tej Bet. You can almost hear the laughter, the gossip, the song of the Azim Ismas NQO. This is the taste of fellowship, the flavor of the common person, a liquid thread connecting neighbors and friends. It's the soul of the community, brewed by the hands of the women who have been its guardians for centuries. You hold the Be Real, feeling its weight. You taste the splendor of Gondar's imperial feasts, the smooth, aged flavor of power and political theater. You taste the quiet defiance of the occupation, the resilience of a culture under threat, a sweet taste of home when home itself was unfree. You taste the hardship of the dirge, a thinner, more watery flavor of survival and endurance. You taste the innovation of the diaspora, carrying a memory of home across oceans, adapting and evolving in new lands. You taste the buzz of the modern Addis Ababa, a flavor of a nation embracing the future while holding on to its past. You taste the ambition of the commercial baller and the inspiration it gives to a craft meat maker in a distant country. And finally, you taste the fragile, precious sweetness of the highlands themselves, a flavor entirely dependent on the health of the bees in the land they call home. This single glass of Tej is a liquid history. It is not a story of grand battles or dramatic betrayals. It is a gentler history, a quieter story, but no less profound. It is a story of how a simple gift from nature, honey, was transformed by human ingenuity, patience, and culture into something more. It became a symbol of national identity, a catalyst for community, a source of joy in times of celebration, and a wellspring of comfort in times of sorrow. It has been present at every turn, a silent, golden witness to the long, complex, and beautiful story of Ethiopia and its people. The ancient Greeks had a word for the drink of the gods, ambrosia, and the lifeblood of the gods was nectar. Here, in your hand, you hold a kind of nectar, a drink born from the lifeblood of flowers, transformed by a near-minus magical process. To drink Tej is to drink a distilled essence of the Ethiopian landscape and its history. It's a sip of liquid sunshine, a taste of resilience, a toast to the enduring sweetness of life. You take one last, slow sip, and let the warmth spread through you, a perfect, golden end to a long and gentle journey. The glass in your hand feels heavier now, its golden contents swirling in a slow, hypnotic pattern. The edges of the world around you begin to soften, the sounds becoming distant and muffled, as if heard from underwater. You are drifting, no longer an active traveler, but a relaxed and peaceful observer, floating on the gentle currents of the story. The hum of the bees has returned, but it is a deep, soothing drone now, the sound of a world settling down for the night. It is the gentle, rhythmic breathing of the highlands themselves. Each soft buzz is a tiny, golden stitch, mending the frayed edges of the day, weaving a blanket of calm that slowly drapes over you. The air is cool and smells of distant rain and night, minus blooming flowers, a perfume brewed just for this moment of transition. You can feel the weight of your own body, a pleasant heaviness in your limbs, as you sink deeper into comfort. The stories of kings and queens, of brewers and priests, are no longer distinct narratives, but have melted together, forming a warm, flowing river of gold that cradles you, rocking you gently. You are a leaf on this river, carried effortlessly toward the quiet ocean of sleep. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go. The journey is complete, and all that remains is this profound sense of peace. The last drop of honeyed light from the story dissolves into the soft darkness, and you let go, drifting into the deep, sweet, and dream-filled quiet that awaits. The end of the article. Good night.